They don't care.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call to order the regular Board of Trustees meeting for Tuesday, February 8th, 2022. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Karstad?
Here.
Trustee Hyman?
Here.
Trustee Stevens?
Here.
Trustee Harvey?
Here.
Trustee Grace?
Here.
Trustee Sorcelli?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower is not present.
Okay, thank you very much. She said she'll be late. Next on our agenda is public comment, and I just had to sign up for them. All right, thank you everyone who signed up. This is a time to speak on anything that is not on tonight's agenda. If you could please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And though you've signed up here, if you could also state your name and address when you get to the podium. So I'll start with Jane Eward.
May I have Terry speak first?
Sure, sure. Teresa Duffin, okay, absolutely.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. First of all, thank you for giving this opportunity. My address is 801 Schofield Road. And I'm here because I am a senior citizen of Berthoud, and I eagerly joined the Berthoud Rec Center. And I joined because, well, first of all, I actually was a fitness instructor and personal trainer in Longmont for more than 25 years. So I'm familiar with the industry. And I was really pleased to see that the original class schedule offered activities suitable for people my age every single day. And so I thought, okay, great. I bought an annual pass. And it opened, I think, mid-November. And of course, then there was a holiday, so I didn't really get active on a regular basis until the new year. I have been going 5 to 6 days a week. And now, a couple of weeks ago, or last week I guess it was, a new class schedule was issued. And that class schedule, in my opinion, I did submit a letter. I assume you saw it. That class schedule really eliminates most of the opportunity for citizens my age to participate on a regular basis. The new class schedule offers 43 classes. Half of those, 21, they're asking us to pay additional money over and above our annual fee. This is unacceptable to people like myself who are on a budget that we don't have. We're not working, so we live on it by a strict budget. Also, when I bought my annual pass, I was told I could attend my pass included any of the classes, except for there were two, the Pi Yoga and then a stroller. And those were an extra charge. So I have regularly attended the Aquafit class on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 10:45 to 11:45. It's a beautiful time for seniors, not too early, not too late. Over the past few weeks, I've had to arrive at the rec center about 45 minutes early to make sure I got a pass to be able to take that class because it's an extremely popular class. And then I also attend the Forever Fit. That's on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday right now. That class, I will admit that the participation was kind of low at first, but in the last 3 weeks, there's been 9, 10, 11, 12 people in that class. That
So
room
we've
is,
come up on the 3 minutes here.
we are already?
Yep.
Anyway, so we met, I and some other people met with the director,
Okay.
Amanda, on Monday. We voiced our concern that, we don't want to have to pay extra to take classes. And were all 3 of the very popular aquafits at 10:45 eliminated? And why is the Forever Fit on Saturday, which is a day where there are still some seniors who are still working, and Saturday is the only day.
Teresa, if we could get, it looks like there's a number of rec center folks that want to speak. If we give them a shot too.
Yes, of course.
Okay. thanks.
Anyway, we expressed our concerns. None of the 5 of us really felt like we were heard.
Okay.
So,
We'll have our administrator speak to this after everyone speaks.
thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Appreciate it. Next on our is, let's see, James, would you like to go now? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I am Jane Ewer. I live at 1538 Vantage Parkway. We've been here just a little over a year. And we live a half a block or a block and a half away from the rec center. When we moved here, we were so excited about this rec center opening. Again, I'm going to reiterate a lot of the things that were just said, but one of the other things that they are doing with all the classes, they have reduced all class times from 1 hour to 45 minutes. And when I asked why this happened, I was told it was because the instructors were not using their full hour. Well, that's not true. I don't believe that's true. All my classes have been a full hour. So that's one of the other things that they have done on reduction. The fees are ridiculous. I mean, for a rec center here, I was excited. I signed up the 3rd of November for a membership, even before it opened. And I was happy to pay the fee. It was a little higher than a lot of the other rec centers in our area for residential, but I was okay with that because it's a brand new facility. So I was very concerned when they started this spring schedule, and I asked them if there was any way that they would reconsider what they were doing as far as pricing and such, and she told me no. And I said, well, we really like these water classes. And she said, well, maybe you ought to try a different class. Well, that didn't go over very well with me because I do other classes there. I go there at least 5 times a week. So that pretty well summarizes what I can say. I know there's a lot of other women here that want us to speak to it as well. So
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Okay. Next is Clarissa Norris.
I am Clarissa Norris, 3599 Bianca Court.
Thank you.
I second what they just said. I've been excited for 30 years now to get this rec center going. In fact, when my kids were little, we were told they were going to have a rec center here, and we finally have one. And I don't go to the rec center for anything but the classes. I don't go for the weights, for the basketball. I just go for the classes. And to know that I'm now going to have to pay additional for what I feel was already a very expensive yearly pass or even daily passes. Like she said, it's way more than what the other places are around here already. But I won't be able to use my year pass if I have to charge or pay extra. And I really do enjoy it there. And the classes they were saying is what I go to as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn Larson.
Lynn Larson, 205 Hubble Street. A couple of weeks ago, we got a postcard in the mail indicating that the town is engaged in another residential survey of residents. And about last week, I think, we received the paper copy of the survey in the mail. Neither the postcard nor the paper copy indicate when the survey needs to be done? What date is the closing date for the survey? And so I would appreciate if you could let us know what date the survey has to be done for those of us who are the select ones in this initial survey before you open it up to the rest of the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Teresa Wynn. Janet Casper Bauer.
Hi, I'm Janet. I just wanted to say that I'm here to support all the people that have spoken before me, and that's what they have said is what I believe. I don't want to pay for extra classes. I was told and signed a contract that said classes would be included. And I was excited about the pool, now they're taking that class away. That's it.
Thank you, Janet. Was it 2021-506, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Finally, Sharon Ducharme, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm a little hard of hearing.
That's okay.
Hi, my name is Sharon Ducharme. I live at 101 South 2nd Street. And I've only been to the rec center once, honestly. But we were gonna set up to go there, the four of us girls, every Wednesday for classes. And it was a lot of fun. I have to say there was a lot of kids in the jacuzzi with only like one adult. But somebody did come and go get out, which was cool because you can't even talk. But anyway, we did the class and I really enjoyed it. But I also talked to someone else that we had met there that she was saying that she stopped going to the classes there because they're so full. There's so many people. So she started going to twice a week to an outside one, I guess, in Longmont. But, you know, I think it's a really great rec center. And I think it's fair at what price it is. But if you go up that much, I think it's going to turn a lot of people away. And I thought it was going to be something that's for the community, not just for making money, but is actually here to help everybody in the community. So I just wanted to voice my opinion that, and I'm a senior too, which I found out I save when I buy, which is awesome. But to pay for a class and to go in there, I think is ridiculous. What's the benefit of if you have to pay that much money to go into a class to enjoy yourself? And I think it's a great thing you guys have done is building that here. And I see there's a lot of people there. And as far as the classes go, I think with so many people wanting to take the aerobics class and this and that, I think they should try to get an extra, maybe instead of 3 days a week, do it 5 days a week, or then it won't be so crowded, or do a couple times that day, you know, just hire more people. I think you'd get a lot more in there because I do know of people that have stopped going because it is so crowded. And now to jack up the price, I think you're gonna lose a lot of clientele. And that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. Does anyone would like to speak that did not have a chance to sign up? All right, I'd like to turn it over to Administrator Kirk if we could.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, so the mask mandate is still in effect till Friday.
Right, I talked to her. I was going to grab an extra one.
Okay, well, I would appreciate doing that now.
Okay. Administrator Kirk, do you mind responding?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know that it makes sense for me to go through every single one of the comments they've made, but I think, you know, I've talked to Amanda, who's our Director of Recreation. I'm happy to answer whatever specific questions you have, but in general, I think the answer is the Aquafit class is still being offered in the evenings. I know that's not the time that they've expressed works best for them. And so we've talked about potentially opening that class back up on Wednesday mornings. Part of it is driven by instructor availability. Part of it is driven by demand for the facility and use of the facilities and the pool in particular. There's a lot that goes into the decision-making process for scheduling, which classes get paid for, which ones are free. Most of the time, the classes that come with a cost, and that's not uncommon. Chilson charges for classes, Longmont charges for classes. They also offer free classes like we do. About half the classes on our schedule are free. But most of the time that's driven by a contract instructor that we pay above and beyond our full-time paid staff that work at the facility. And so most of the time, the paid class is a contract instructor rather than a town employee. As we all know, we would love to hire more people. There's a balance between how much you have to pay that person to be available full-time or even part-time, how long you can keep folks. As you can imagine, we've had a lot of turnover at the rec center already since we opened. That's just kind of the natural way those go. So as we can offer those classes, both because of staffing availability and because of facility availability, we will. We still have lots of free offerings. I recognize not all of those might be, maybe the high intensity interval training is a free class, but maybe not the best class for seniors. We get that. So Amanda and her staff are looking for some compromise position where we can still offer that class in the morning and potentially on Saturdays if we can find an instructor.
When we adjust fees, it sounds like we've done it already, when do we typically do that? Or look at
So
those?
we didn't change the fee. The Aquafit class is still free. It's just not being offered at the time in the mornings. It's only being offered in the evenings. The evening class is very popular also. It's very well attended. But we didn't change the fee for the class. We changed when it's available.
So may I make a comment? Okay. So first of all, to address some of your concerns, I know an Aquafit instructor who wants to work at Berthoud. So I might offer you her name.
Sure,
She's been
send her our
doing
way.
it she's been doing it for 12, 15 years now. So she's not someone who's gonna run off on you. She'll be a steady employee. Second question for you is this. Did we exceed the number of memberships that we anticipated for the year?
Yeah, our original estimate was 600 and we're in the 2,000 range. So
Oh, wow.
we have.
So we have more income coming in than we anticipated.
That's true from a membership
Okay.
perspective, sure.
And so we budgeted for a much lower number.
We did. We budgeted for a much higher subsidy as well.
Okay, so it seems as if there might be a little bit of room to maybe hire some more people. Even though we could make up more of it is a losing endeavor. It's always a losing endeavor, and I understand that. However, we are doing much better than we anticipated, so maybe we might be able to possibly take some of that difference between what we've budgeted and what we're taking in and potentially put it into some instructors that we could use for the next year and then reevaluate when we get to the year mark. Would that be something that the staff would consider?
I think what I would say is the staff is considering those things, right? Amanda and her team are constantly evaluating what's the best way to provide activities and programs for the most people, right? Scheduling the facility is an interesting challenge. It comes with all kinds of other challenges too, right? And we have people writing on the floor in the gym with Sharpie and drinking alcohol in the pool, and there's always something, right? I mean, managing the rec center is a whole lot more than scheduling classes, of course,
Right.
and they're constantly evaluating what's the best way to do that, both from a staffing perspective and otherwise. So I think the simple answer to your question is yes.
But there is a larger perspective, it sounds like, with competing priorities on.
Sure, it's
the
things like
overall
swim
staff.
lessons. We opened up swim lessons, which you have to pay for, whether you remember or not. And most of our swim lesson times filled up immediately for months out, right? So finding time for an ultra high demand important program, right? We're teaching kids how to swim and adults who maybe don't know how to swim, but mostly kids. Finding pool time for them is a challenge too, right? So it's just this constant balance between programs, wants, needs, demands. And, I think our staff's trying to strike the best balance. And, Amanda and her team have certainly heard the concerns that have been expressed and are looking for ways to accommodate more of those programs.
Would there be an opportunity potentially for the people who spoke tonight to come together with staff or make suggestions for what times might be available? Maybe it's only early morning, or maybe it's only in the evening. That
I
you
think
could
Amanda
take your
and
classes.
Amber, I think, met with this group already.
Okay.
Certainly got some feedback, and I talked to Amanda today. She said they've got a couple of options they're looking at. They've got to find staffing and move some things around, but that there may be an opportunity to
All right,
make some accommodations.
great. I'll go ahead and I'll make sure that you have the contact information for the aquafit instructor that I know.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Good comments.
Just one question. So we have a discounted senior membership, which I was happy to qualify for. Anyway, do we have a different rate for senior citizens for classes, or are the classes just a set fee?
The daily rate to come into the facility to take a class is less, but so like the free classes, we don't charge for, so you have to pay the daily rate to come in. There is a reduced daily rate. I don't believe we have reduced program fees. Those program fees are the same regardless of age. So like swim lessons, for instance, it's the same price based on which class you're taking. The same is true, I think, with our other fitness.
That might be something to look at in line with Maureen's comment that we might be able to subsidize some of the classes more because we have a little more revenue than we thought. So maybe we could offer a senior citizen rate for some of the classes.
We've
So
also talked about offering just a member rate for those classes, because a lot of folks that take classes don't have memberships. They just pay the daily rate to come in, or they pay the class fee. Some do have memberships and then pay the fee on top of that, or they only take the free classes. But there may be an opportunity, and our staff's already looking at it, for charging a member rate for those program fees that's a little less than.
that sounds like a really good idea, because if you're paying the $500, $700 for a membership, it seems like getting a discount on the classes over a walk-in would make a lot of sense. Awesome.
All right, well, thank you, folks. I'd like to address Mr. Larson's question too, about the deadline for the survey.
I honestly, I'd have to check. I think the simple answer is as soon as you can fill it out. We have had like almost 300 responses already, so that's great. But I'll have to double check.
You
I'm
didn't
not
just
sure-
send one?
I'm not sure I know what
I
the
thought we
deadline
just
is.
sent one out.
We sent out kind of 2 waves of notices. So the first was like the postcard, and then the other was like a paper survey. And then it will be opened up to the public. Those results will be kept separate, right? Because the online version is harder to make statistically valid. So there's a paper survey. It's actually an online survey, but sent to a select group of households, which is like 2,000 households. And that's the one that's open now. The general, anybody could fill out survey will be open in the beginning of March.
Cool. All right. Great. Well, thank you everyone who showed up. We'll keep our eye on those fees and stuff. I think there were some great comments here on what we can do about that. Okay. We'll move on to consent agenda. Trustees, like any of either the minutes or what's the other one here?
Tonight's agenda.
Tonight's agenda or the meeting minutes from the January 25th removed?
I move to approve the consent agenda items A and B.
Yeah. All right, trustee Hyman moved, trustee Hardy seconded. Any discussion on that? Clerk, may I roll call vote, please?
Trustee Grace?
Yes.
Trustee Hardy?
Yes.
Trustee Hyman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower?
Yes.
Trustee Sorcelli?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck?
Yes. All right, next on our agenda is the annual committee reports. This is a chance for all of our committees, once a year to come up to the board and kind of appraise us of what's going on. Start out with our town forester, Josh Embry.
Howdy everyone, Josh Embry, Town Forester and Open Space Manager. It's good to see all y'all.
Josh, you can take off your mask at the podium if you're comfortable doing that. If not, that's fine too, but you're welcome to
Thank
at
you.
the podium.
It's good to see y'all. Thank y'all for having me, and thank y'all for y'all's support over the past few years. Before we get into this, I want to give a big shout out to the tree committee, previous members and current members for their dedication and time. They're vital in public outreach and community education, and provide good feedback to staff and recommendations throughout the year. So big shout out to them. I don't want them to go unrecognized. So with that being said, I'm gonna hand the torch over to Mr. Bob Schneider, the Tree Advisory Committee chair, if he's on, Christian. Okay. And he's gonna run through this short and sweet kind of annual report presentation.
Excellent.
Can you hear me, Josh?
Yes, sir.
Can you see me, Josh?
I cannot see you.
Okay.
That's all right, though, we have the slides in, oh, well, the board has the slides in front of us.
Okay, that's fine then. Good evening, everyone. As Josh said, my name is Bob Schneider. I live at 3562 Alyssa Drive here in Berthoud. I'm currently the head of chairperson for the Berthoud Tree Advisory Committee, and we'll go through the annual report here. Just to start off with, we essentially now have our committee filled back up. We had a couple of new folks that have come on board, and we've got a few that have been around for a few years, so we've got a bit of a mix right there, just to let everyone know. Start off with our slideshow here. Probably our first event, which we do every year, is the Arbor Day celebration, which this past year we did over at the Berthoud Reservoir Park and Open Space, is where we got together on Saturday, April 24th, 2021, and we planted a sucker punch chokeberry tree. And that was attended by town staff, tree advisory committee members, and folks from the community. Went real nice, had a sunny day, and got the tree put in the ground, and everything went real well there for that. Our next slide is talking a little bit about something we really need to be proud of in this community. And as Josh stated, when we look at this thing here saying it's been a Arbor Day Foundation Tree City USA for 38 years, there's a whole lot more people involved in that 38 years. And I'm sure some of you know some of the folks I'm speaking of, to have a continuation of that many years. And as I said, not only is this our 38th year as a Tree City, we've also been named the Sterling Tree City USA for 10 times now. And Berthoud has actually had that growth award now for 5 consecutive years, which is really important. And as our community grows, I think that's something that, we all need to be proud of. One of the things that folks we're all familiar with is the emerald ash borer, which has made its way into Colorado over the years. It's one of those things that essentially was more prevalent in the Midwest, but unfortunately it's made its way into other parts of the country. And so our tree treatment program has been going real well. We did a number of trees in 2020. Now last year, we had essentially treated 20 right-of-way emerald ash or ash trees for emerald ash borer. And this next year, I think Josh and his folks hope to, maybe get as many as 300 right-of-way trees treated, which would be, obviously a much greater number of trees to be treated. And it's just one of those things we're going to have to keep up with. At this point in time, there's not been a way to successfully eradicate the emerald ash borer, so the treatment is really the only thing we can do to take care of some of these very, very large and getting to be old ash trees that line a number of streets, and particularly in the old portion of Berthoud. One of the things that popped up this past year, which was a little different, as we've talked about before the past few years, the emerald ash borer treatment has kind of come to the forefront just because of the scope of that. But this past year, in the Green Lawn Cemetery, if you go out there, there's a number of large, very large, and getting to be older spruce trees out there that really started to show some stress. And a lot of times stress for these trees is due from a prolonged drought. And that makes them a little bit more susceptible to insects or disease. And in this case, what happened was, I think a lot of it, again, due to our drought conditions we've been having, we got the Ips Beetle in there, which is primarily a beetle that attacks and can kill both pine and spruce trees. In this particular case, we had those older spruce out there. Josh and his crew were able to get that taken care of and get 40 of them treated for the Ips. And this is kind of, again, like a lot of disease and insects with trees. You have to kind of develop a strategic approach on how you're going to manage these things. And in this particular case, they got into them fairly quick, and we'll just kind of see how this progresses. Again, as the trees get older, they're more susceptible to stress, and in this case around here, we just had a lot of drought to deal with. This past year, we've got 32 trees that were planted in various areas across our town parks and public areas. And again, if you have the time, I think that Josh has developed a very good list of trees that are probably going to be most successful to grow in the environment that we have here in Berthoud with at times limited water and things of that nature. So if you get a chance sometime, I know that's on the website. He's done, I'm going to pat him on the back. He's done a real good job putting a lot of this stuff together, and some of it in a relatively short amount of time. So we did get 32 planted this year, and I think we'll probably shoot for more this year. Again, Josh and his group and were able to get 67 trees pruned that were in our town parks and public areas. And a lot of times pruning is done for numerous and various reasons. A lot of times, one of the main things is you're going in there and taking any dead wood out, particularly if you've got, a tree in a public area or a park. You want to, you can't always be 100% sure you're not going to lose a limb here or there, but what they have done is gone through and essentially they're inventorying trees that need to be cleaned up. And by cleaned up, I mean limbed and cut back, get the dead wood out of there, and then you go from there and kind of watch them to see if if that's successfully going to take care of the problem. So they were able to get 67 of those taken care of over 2021. Unfortunately, I guess, times you have to remove trees too. I mean, in this particular case, they had to take 40 out of the town parks and public areas. And again, some of those were some of the spruce trees that just did not survive. And I think the thing we have to remember on the tree removal is no matter how well we take care of these mature trees, they've got a shelf life on them, so to speak. So there are going to be trees that, regardless of how much work is done or how we try to take care of them or baby them or keep them healthy, eventually we're going to have to remove these urban trees. And I think that's kind of the difference. We've all been out, in a large forest. If one tree disappears, it's not so much of a big deal. In many cases, you don't even notice it. But when we're talking about individual trees in an urban setting like we have here, when we do have to remove 2 or 3 or 4 trees, then it does show up. And so, again, the forestry group here, I think, are doing a good job staying on top of that. One of the kind of exciting things is as we've talked about having to remove trees for whatever reason, is to have a nursery where you have the ability to go in there and essentially grow new trees of different species and then work that into a replacement program for the ones that do have to be removed. And we've had some, the committee and Josh and group, so to speak, have had some pretty good discussions on this over the last few months, and even our meeting last month, we spent a good bit of time talking about this. I think it's kind of an exciting project for the town to put another nursery together. This one over by Roberts Lake that's proposed will be, probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 125 trees in it. Because of its location adjacent to water, we're not going to really have that much problem getting water over there. We have road access to it. We'll be able to get in there and take care of this fairly easily. And when I say fairly easy, just from the standpoint that it'll be very easily monitored because of the location. And, these 100 to 125 trees will probably be planted on probably an 8x8 basis, so that we can keep this cleaned up in there, keep it mowed nicely, and so we, have something not only while we're growing the trees, but it's then something nice to look at too as this progresses. And as these trees get bigger, they'll go into the a program where, we'll replace trees that we lose in town. And kind of a follow-up to that, have been discussing a reforestation plan. And essentially what this would be, as we've talked about, or I've talked about over the last few minutes here, is as we have trees start to mature and we start to lose trees for whatever reason may be, that what we do is we go in there prior to and start doing what's called a shadow program or a shadow planning. And this would be essentially set up in the quote old town portion of Berthoud, where we have the mature trees at this time. And so when we go in there and plant a tree adjacent to one of our current large trees that's in there, as we down the road, if we lose that tree for whatever reason, we'll have shadow planted another tree in there in the right of way, which will kind of given us a method to kind of continue to grow our urban forest, knowing that we will lose trees as we go along, as I stated earlier. But as we shadow plant and those trees are taken care of, then they will be kind of like the kids growing up, and they'll be the replacements. And I think it's a really good idea, and it's one of the things that you can truly see results in as you go along, because if you take something out and you have a plan for it ahead of time, then you're sitting there with nothing but the stump, so to speak, and you're behind the curve. And this way, if we get this started and get the shadow planning going, we'll kind of be ahead of the game. So just to kind of reiterate our statistics for 2021, which, as we all know, is an interesting year to deal with a lot of things, but I think that the town forestry department did a good job. They got 32 new trees planted. They've got 40 taken out. Got some good pruning done on 67, and they did get 61 trees treated, 20 of those being the right-of-way ash trees and the other spruce trees that we talked about earlier that were becoming susceptible to the Ips Beetle. So I think that that what Josh and his folks have proposed for a 2022 yearly projection is quite remarkable. Looking back at what we were able to get done last year, looking to plus or minus, remember on these, maybe get as many as 200 trees planted. Tree removals, we don't know that, because that's one of those things, particularly with deciduous trees or the ash trees or trees of that nature, until we get spring growth started and see which ones made it or didn't make it. that's going to be a figure that's kind of up in the air. The objective is to get as many as 145 trees pruned through the parks and open space and areas that town's responsible for, and maybe get as many as 300 trees treated for whatever disease or insects may come along. And hopefully it's not going to be any more, hopefully treatment for, preventing emerald ash borer or any more problems with the Ips beetles or anything associated with that. But again, that's something that's always going to be an unknown as far as what may come down the road. There are other things out there that could pop up, and if we could get a little bit more rain this calendar year, that would help too. Ladies and gentlemen, that kind of is kind of a brief synopsis of the program for 2021. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions?
No questions. I have a comment when it's appropriate.
Chair Schneider, when you say 8 by 8, does that just mean 8 long by 8 wide for the nursery?
Yeah, if you essentially, so if you had a mower that was 6 feet wide, there would be a foot on each side of the trees in the row. So that basically what it's done in forestry type planning is you may go down to a 6 by 6 and 8 by 8. I've even planted on 10 by 10s. And if you have an acre with a 10 by 10 planting, you can put 436 trees in an acre like that. So that's essentially done for ease to maintain them and to clean them up. And the other thing is, if you get them too close together and you get a mower that's a little bit narrow, a little wider than your area, you take a chance on barking the trees, which barking the trees is just knocking the bark off of them, and that's not good for young trees, or really not that great for any tree. So that's kind of the reason. And Josh may actually go down to a 6 by 6. He and I were talking about that just today, and I just threw that number out so you kind of have an idea, that kind of what we're looking at there.
Awesome. And with the nursery, is there any thoughts about doing that around Arbor Day for volunteers? Or
We thought about it. I mean, when we received the grant for the Hillsdale Nursery and we did it for Arbor Day, it was a great turnout. Actually, probably the biggest one Berthoud's ever had. So it's in consideration. We still don't know. It's in the air.
Yeah.
So we'll determine that in March.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's my only question. Any other questions or comments?
Well,
Good.
sure. The 300 treated, the EAB treatments for next year, is that retreating the ones we already treated?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So
So
they're
that's
all
every 3 years or every 2 years?
We initially kind of started every 2 to 3, but I think we're going to start pushing it out every 3, just considering emerald ash borer actually hasn't technically been detected within town limits. We're safe to say that we're good for every 3. So.
Yeah, so are you ready for a quick comment?
Go ahead.
No, I think phenomenal work. I do really commend the tree committee. I'm glad you got it back up to full strength. For a town of our size to have a dedicated forester staff position, I think is amazing, and it speaks a lot to the priority Berthoud puts on trees. I think we took the most unusual approach. I don't know of any other community that decided to fight emerald ash borer by treating all of their right-of-way trees, all of their important trees, which are worth millions of dollars and are completely irreplaceable in our town. I think you said 60% of our street trees are ash trees.
Canopy wise, I would say, but overall, it used to be about 33% species, and now with new development and our management plan, we've dropped that down to about 19%. So.
But in Old Town, it's very
right. Old Town, the majority of trees are ash.
Yeah, and that's because they grew well at the time, and emerald ash borer wasn't here. So if we hadn't done that, but anyway, Boulder, Fort Collins, their process is to cut down the ash trees and replace them with something else. And if we did that in downtown Berthoud, it would be a dramatic difference. So I'm really proud of us treating, how many trees did we treat last year? Was it 300?
It was just under 500.
Yeah, so that's really unique approach. And then I just had some thoughts on the nursery. I know that we had problems with water table at Hillsdale, and I'm familiar with at least the north side of the drainage at Roberts Lake, which just extremely high water table. We had, complaints from neighbors up there with water in their crawl spaces last year. So I just wouldn't want to see us repeat our mistake. And I did mention to staff that the original site of the original nursery in Berthoud was the Wagner Farm. And Mark French did an article about that in the paper about the founding father who created the first nursery in Berthoud. And since the south portion of Wagner is dedicated to ag anyway, I think we might be able to partner with Northern Colorado and do a 500 tree nursery and have lots of education there about the benefit of trees and which ones grow best in our in our climate. Chris mentioned, maybe a tree lawn demonstration project that could show different ways to do your tree lawn. So anyway, I'll leave it up to you guys whether Roberts is a good location or not, but I think long-term, having a nice arboretum on the corner of Wagner might be a really.
No, that's a great comment. We've looked into that in the past. I think arboretum, well, it's definitely different from a tree nursery. Tree nursery is where we grow trees and harvest them for plantings, but an arboretum would be like exotic species or species that we wouldn't move. They would just be planted, interpretive sign, education about it. So it is a great possibility, something to definitely look into in the future. In regards to Hillsdale, the whole purpose behind that was education. We received the grant through the Colorado Tree Coalition for that sole install because of emerald ash borer and talking about diversity and removing unwanted ash and replacing them with the new species. The Hillsdale Nursery, like I said, was experimental. We took Colorado State Forest Service recommendation of a pot and pot system as well as a root bag system, which at the time there was very little literature behind the root bags. The pot and pot system, the issue isn't actually groundwater.
Okay.
It's the water used to irrigate the trees and any precipitation that accumulates within the pots. So the pots actually have drain tile underneath them to allow water to not accumulate in the pot and suffocate the root system. So we took that approach knowing that we would have excess water. We didn't think it would be that much. So staff this year already anticipates removing the pot and pot system, going back to the root bag system because we did see good results with that. And there's new literature that now suggests the root bag system is an efficient way to grow trees. It's the cheapest up front. So
You're the forester, Josh.
And in Roberts, the north side has, we do mow out there. We are aware that it is relatively wet at times. The south side tends to not be as wet. With these root bag systems, we can plant them in the ground. We can plant them above ground. We prefer in ground for stability and insulation, but we plant these trees. One year it's dry, the next year it's too boggy. We could always just literally pull the trees up and transplant them somewhere else. So I think with that, we're gonna roll, just kind of, go with the flow with this one again and see how it works. Like the Hillsdale did turn out good with the root bag system. The pot and pot did produce better tree quality, but with the water, it was just more maintenance. So we will be going to the root bag system, and I definitely think something at Wagner Farm should be talked about, and it's something that I will discuss with the Tree Advisory Committee this year. So,
Other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you very much, Mr. Schneider and Josh. Mr. Embry, appreciate it.
Thank you.
thank you all, appreciate it.
Great.
Yeah, tell the committee, thanks.
Yep, definitely, well done.
Next up is the Parks, Open Space, Recreation, and Trails Committee. Keith Noel.
Thank you, Board. Keith Knoll, Public Works Operations Manager, also staff representative for the Port Committee. Take a quick moment to thank all the committee members. We're pretty fortunate right now. We're opening parks yearly. Our amenities port-wise are growing. Many of the projects going through right now have seen multiple committee members, so thanks to all the members that have joined. Also, thank you to Trustee Hyman, who's been our liaison for almost 2 years. We're getting close to that. He bridges the gap between the board and Port, and then he also provides plenty of history and background. So with that, I'm going to introduce our Port Chair, Phil Klein.
So is this broadcasting up here?
It will.
Okay, cool. So, hello. My name is Phil Klein, and I have the pleasure of being the Port Chair for actually this year. Things are a little funky. I mean, I didn't take over until Chair until the end of the year, and I'm doing the report for the previous year. Most of the year, last year, the Chair was Jose Cabrera. And as you can see from the first slide, we've had a couple of changes in our membership over the course of the year. We had some comings and goings during the summer. And right now, the current composition has been in there for about 3 meetings or so. So I'm going to go ahead and advance the slide. I want to also thank Keith, wherever you are, you're back there now, and Jeff as well for their work on the committee. I do want to highlight that we have a youth advisor, and I routinely mispronounce her last name, so I apologize. I think it's Zoe Sco. Shoot.
Yes, shoot.
Darn. Routinely. And it's helpful, and I think I want to compliment the town board for including that for Parks, Open Space, Recreation, and Trails Committee. And her contributions have been helpful. We don't get a lot of public comment on the Port Committee. And when we do, though, it sometimes comes in waves. So there were a couple of during the last year where we had a fair number of folks from town come up and express their concerns, mostly with respect to access to Berthoud Reservoir for non-motorized boating. And I think that was resolved to their satisfaction. We've had a lot of pickleball discussions on Port this year. And it was a really interesting dynamic because we had a lot of folks come by from the pickleball community and the pickleball club to express the need or the requirement, demand really for more courts and better access to the courts. That was an issue that the board handled pretty expeditiously. I think within a matter of weeks when that was brought out that there wasn't appropriate ADA access, that was taken care of. So they were a presence for our meetings, and the other shoe fell in December when we started hearing from some of the folks who live near the existing pickleball courts who were complaining about the noise. So I'll talk about that one in a couple of slides. The end of the year, we heard from the folks who were going to be working with you folks on potential conservation easement for the Newell Farm and having that become incorporated into the town park system as things go forward. So we expressed the Port Committee expressed its desire for that. As when I talk about open space in a little bit, you can see that that's a pretty important theme for us overall. Moving on, Port's a great acronym, and we appreciate having a very handy acronym to refer to us. That being said, I'm going to blend Parks and Recreation together here and not give them separate slides because they are so intertwined. Over the course of the year, we had a couple of opportunities to visit as the Recreation Center was being built. Early on, I can't remember the exact month, but it was still just mostly structural outlines at that point. And then later, a couple of weeks before the official opening, the Port Committee had the opportunity to visit and get tours, as well being there for the grand opening. We also heard throughout the year from Amanda and her staff, as she, actually not so much from her staff, but as she was forming her staff, and some of the plans that they were doing. And you can see from tonight's comment that there's some growing pains to be going. I think that's to be expected. And it's been a real pleasure to work on the Port Committee when all of this is going on. But we tend to be more future-oriented, right? So, I mean, whatever port stuff was on the Parks and on the Wagner Farms a couple of years ago. Well, we've been spending this last year on, in terms of park and recreation, we had a fair amount of discussion about the park and the positioning of the park and the location of the park and the trails of Creekside development. When I get to the open space slide, you'll see that one of our concerns on Port is maintaining the space around an existing amenity like Hillsdale Park as best as possible. And so that's kind of come through on several of our discussions over the year. But that particular meeting was looking at just the park within the development itself and considering how that might best be situated in terms of connectivity with other parks on that kind of emerging southwest corner of the town. We've also spent some time looking at and providing some advice on the revising the fitness trail at Vine Park, which is extremely underutilized as is. And Vine Park's seen a lot of improvements on the trail itself to make it a much more pleasant, the circular trail, the soft surface trail, as well as the building of the connection along 10th Avenue has been really huge. But so now we're kind of trying to figure out how better to make use of Vine Park. And this is actually where our youth advisor really was helpful, because kind of saying what would be fun for an age group that we don't have a lot of stuff to do in town for, and that's the young teenagers. So the obstacle course idea kind of emerged as something that might be really popular. And I think, we'll keep going here, this spring, do you want to maybe catch us when that's going to obstacle course?
Yeah, May or June.
May or June, okay. So that's something to look forward to. We also been looking at the redesign of Town Park, and at one point we were looking at where the pickleball courts might go, and then I think after our meeting at the end of the year, it kind of became clear that Town Park isn't the best place for the pickleball courts because of the noise. However, we have, I think, on the Port Committee, a fairly strong sense that this needs to be an active center of town, not purely passive kinds of quiet recreation, but the opportunity to, the splash pad is everyone's looking forward to that, but looking for other ways of drawing people into the parks that's close to town. And then on that list, there's about 4 or 5 other things that we did, just kind of small things where we're just responding to Keith's staff. Probably the biggest of those is the bike park design that's coming into Richardson Park, which we spent some time looking at. Trails, we're always focusing on connectivity. I've been on the committee for 3 years. We've been kind of focusing on some of the same connectivity all this time. So it's a slow process, and we just kind of want to make sure that these ideas continue to come forward. And we're seeing a lot of good progress on that in the new Trails, Unified Trails Master Plan that just came out for comment last month. And so we've been looking at that, and we were kind of really trying to focus in on maintaining that north-south connection, primarily to make sure that we connect up with what we can with Loveland, and to get through some of the newer developments on the northwest part of town, like Vantage and Heron Lakes, and particularly that one nature rookery trail. We've talked something about the need for signage and the need for sort of consistent design, so people know where the parks are, where the trails are, and where they are on that trail. So that's kind of been an ongoing discussion. Well, we had opportunity during the 2021 to look at open space planning, and this was one of several opportunities that the Port Committee had to hear from some of the professional planning consultants that the town has retained to help with this, and they've all been excellent. So I want to compliment the committee on the town board on that. You've done a good job on hiring folks who know what they're doing. They do a very good job. And this is coming as somebody who works in that field. I mentioned earlier the point about Hillsdale Park and providing as much buffer as possible, given the limitations that we have to work with, but kind of just being conscious and being aware of the unique gems that some of the town parks provide. But we've spent a lot of time looking at different stages of the plan, of the open space master plan, and I've highlighted there in the report 3 areas that we felt on the committee were most important moving forward, is keeping the agricultural heritage and the view sheds surrounding the town, so that it doesn't blend quite so readily into the remaining part of northern Colorado. And focusing on trails to the open space corridors. And we're real particularly interested in somewhere down the road seeing a Little Thompson Trail. I mean, we keep talking about that as kind of a long range kind of thing, and it's, we hope we can make that a little bit shorter range, especially if there is going to be a development on the far end of Berthoud East. And as I mentioned, conservation easements, which I think, from what I understand from what Jeff has said at the committee meeting, that is something that you're already looking at pretty closely. So for 2022, we will be looking at the Unified Trails Master Plan next month, apparently. So they're going to come back really quickly with the suggestions. They had a lot of comment from the public on that, which was really good to see. And on that trails plan, the public identified a lot of useful stuff. So we'll see how that comes out. The east side of Arbor Lake Park, I mentioned earlier with the tree farm, we're also looking at the plan currently calls for a lot of passive recreation there. Not a lot of passive recreation, not a lot of space, but passive recreation, things like butterfly gardens and things that would be quiet for the neighbors in that part of town. And it's a little bit nicer trail through that. Richardson Park, I expect to be something that we'll be hearing a little bit more about during the course of the year. And one of the things that we're sensitive to on the committee is thinking in terms of the timing of things like, what are we going to do with Town Park and the ball fields there, and emerging new ball fields coming up at Richardson Park, making sure that we don't run into a gap, because people are really concerned about losing those ball fields at Town Park, at least from the public comment. So I think there's a lot of timing issues to be done, and I'd say trail signage. And so that, I think, covers what I want to say. I hope I haven't blitzed through it too quickly. Again, some thank yous to everybody. It's really a pleasure to work on that committee. A, because we're doing fun things, recreation, and B, because we have some funds to work with, and thanks to the town's generosity of taxing itself to be able to make the kind of amenities that we can be proud of. So I want to, that's just, it's been a pleasure to work on that committee. It's my last year on it. But we've got a lot of good folks going forward and a lot of good ideas, and I think it's in a good shape. So I'm happy to entertain any questions you all might have.
Thank you very much. Questions? That was very comprehensive. Any comments?
A comment.
All right.
It was refreshing to hear there's thought going into the east side, Little Thompson Trail, kind of some connectivity there. Generally, it gets forgotten or not talked about, so I'm glad that's at least in the back of some people's minds.
Yeah, and in the trail, I get all the plans confused. But in one of the trails is talking, having Mountain Avenue be a biking corridor, which is a logical, makes perfect sense. It's straight, flat, but not everybody wants to be riding on that kind of or recreating, whether it's hiking or whatever, walking their dogs on a state highway. So having some kind of east-west alternative is, I think, pretty important.
I agree. Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions, comments?
Well, just the committee is phenomenal, and it's great to see. So part of the transition was that 2 of the previous members moved up and were appointed to the planning commission. So they got their start to their experience at Port, and then they moved up to the planning commission and brought that expertise up to that level, which is awesome, which is great. But our new members are phenomenal. I mean, the amount of intelligence expertise and just the comments at the meetings. It really is a great committee. It's well attended. We pretty much have full attendance almost every meeting. And I really, I will echo what Phil said. So 3 years ago, and Maureen, who was the previous liaison, can also relate to this, but you know, we had meetings where we talked about low-hanging fruit and what could we do with existing money. And so we could do phase 1 of the reservoir, but not phase 2, and we didn't have money for a trail, and et cetera, et cetera. And you know, having the Parks and Rec sales tax has really changed that dynamic tremendously. But then in addition to that, staff went out, you know, the number one priority of Port has been this north-south connection to get Heron Lakes and Prairie Star and Heron Point connected to downtown. And town staff went out and got a $500,000 grant so that that project can happen, hopefully this summer. But, you know, that's been, as you said, that's been the number one priority for like 5 years. So, but it's a really exciting time. And to think that we're master planning Richardson, we just finished or are wrapping up the town park master plan. We're gonna be building the bike park out at the west side of Richardson this summer. It's just incredible. And then the other thing the committee supported last meeting was the one of the public comments on the trails plan was that there was no trail along First Street going north. And that made a lot of sense, and that's gonna be part of the innovation district. So I think the sense was we could add a trail requirement as part of the innovation district, but that'll help the east side connection, because that'll connect to Farmstead and Mary's Farm. So anyway, great work, way to step up and be chair, and yeah, thanks to Keith too.
It's fun to be a chair of a committee that's got that's got resources that much beats the alternative. So, thanks.
I do have one more comment, and that is, aside from what Trustee Hyman said, and obviously the enthusiasm of the people who are on the committee, which is fantastic, I'm really glad that you guys are having input on some of the new developments coming in. I mean, your input on maintaining and expanding some of the buffers for Hillsdale, it was critical for us to have that. So I just wanted to say thank you staff for including the Port Committee on those parks that are coming in with some of these new developments. It really makes a difference, so thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right, our final presentation is from HPAC, the Historic Preservation Advisory Commission. Town Planner Adam Lowliger.
Matt, your presentation should be next. Let's see it on here. All right. Oh,
Good evening, trustees. My name is Adam Wollinger. I'm the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee's staff liaison. On the Zoom call is actually our new chairman, Todd Duval. I believe he's on the Zoom call. He was going to try to make it tonight. If he's good to go, I might just turn it over to him and let him give you the rundown on what's been going on in historic preservation over the past 12 months.
Fantastic.
Hi, everyone. I'm having the same problem as Bob. It's looking like my camera doesn't want to cooperate. I think it had a long work day today for some reason, but can everybody hear me okay?
If you could speak, if you got a mic there, if you could speak a little closer into it.
Absolutely. Yeah, let me do that.
Thank you.
Okay, how about that?
It works.
Okay, great. So yeah, I apologize again, the video's not working, but I'll fiddle with it here. I'm doing the presentation. So yeah, like Adam said, I'm newly appointed. So it was towards the end of the year, well, just at the end of the year, where I was appointed to chairperson. I do have the pleasure of doing that. I was appointed as a member of the committee back in July. So again, a short term so far, but I'm excited about it. I was glad to take the position of chair, just having kind of the passion in that. We're the community, obviously, and I have some past roots here in the Berthoud area and stuff like that. And so I moved up here myself 2 years ago. So I'm really excited about it, and I'd love to be a part of this committee and just kind of part of the community and the town. So I'm gonna go ahead and, you guys know that it's the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee, also referred to as HPAC. So if I say HPAC a lot, you know what I'm referring to. So we're just better known as HPAC. We did, so throughout 2021, again, just being newly appointed, I'm also giving, a report of most of the year, or part of the year where I was not a member, but I'm glad to do that. So during the year 2021, we met on the second Monday of every month. And then talking about the committee itself, at the beginning of 2021, there was one vacant seat. I was the lucky one. I got to fill the vacant seat in July. So we did fill that seat, but Doug Carlander's second term expired in September, and then Helen Scavone resigned in January of this year, 2022. So we do have currently 2 vacant seats on the HPAC. So please, if you know of anybody, please send them our way. We would love to have 2 more members. Even though we have fantastic members already, we'd love to have 2 more. So please put the word out if you can, or if you know somebody who has a passion or they're excited about historic preservation, this is a great committee to be then for Berthoud. So during, throughout the year, 2021, the HPAC reviewed several things. We discussed a lot of things, and we even recommended the appropriate course of action on many different topics. So I'm going to give you some of those topics that we did, or some of those events or topics that we discussed and reviewed. I'd like to bring up, first of all, there was an addition of 2 new properties, okay, so in the registry historic. So we wanted to, we're excited about that, right? So I hope everybody else as well is. In late 20 and early 2021, the 2 new properties were approved for local historic landmarks. So great for that. The 2, these properties are the J.M. Lutner House, which is located at 426 Benson Avenue, and the United Brethren Church on 348 Turner Avenue. So fantastic to have them, right, part of the local historic landmarks. And again, we keep as our, committee as well. This is exciting to see because as we grow as a community, we like to see that we add additional historic properties, right, as we grow. So this is fantastic. Also throughout, so in 2021, there were some historic alterations of 3 different buildings. Okay, so these alterations, we approved these alterations of the 3 buildings. What this does is this allows the owners to make changes, right? Sometimes, modernize and whatever, but, and especially to the exterior of the building, we want to retain that historical character though, right? So again, this is a great balance between historic property owners, the town, and us being fortunate to have and keep these properties as historic properties and keep this historical character around the community for Berthoud. So I'm going to tell you about these. So these properties start with the August Johnson House, located at 500 First Street. And you see on the slide there and everything. So I'll go a little bit slow since there's a couple of them. But the McCarty Medical Office Building, located at 338 Massachusetts Avenue, and the Zoller Shoe Shop, 315 Mountain Avenue. So if you can see it very well, but I think you can see that, we did a good job again of the balance of trying to allow property owners that flexibility, but great historical characters still remain. So we're very proud about those 3 properties. Okay, another thing I did in 2021. So we made the purchase and installation of 3 plaques. Okay, so Adam, thank you for the slide here. The 3 new plaques that we received and installed in 2021. The first one, the J.M. Lutner House, again located at 426 Benson Avenue, and then the W.H. McCormick House, 609 5th Street. They received brand new plaques. So also the John Bell House, 633 at 6th Street, had its plaque replaced. So great that we could also do that as well. So that's fantastic for the John Bell House. Okay, and then also, but there were 2 historic revocation of 2 buildings, okay, in 2021. This is the Chalman Ray House at 548 Mountain Avenue, and the Art House located at 706 7th Street, had their historic landmark status revoked at the request, of the respective property owners. Okay? And sometimes this happens if they're just not aware, or there's some kind of fear of this, and sometimes there can be further instances where they're just not even completely aware of what historic means, or those kinds of things. But so that did happen in last year, sorry, as part of the historic preservation. So, okay, so let me move on to what are we going to do in 2022? So, along with some, ongoing goals in that, we feel that the committee, we want to start this program called the Exceptional Landmark Home and Business Award. So, this is something that came up by the committee. We think this is a great thing to do in promotion more, right, of historical landmarks in the community. So we're throwing around some ideas about this, but we want to go further with implementing it, of course, in 2022. But we think it could be a quarterly award where the committee, will vote and recognize outstanding preservation efforts, of these property owners around the town. So give them something they can, again, some kind of plaque of some sort they can display, be proud of that right. And so we think that's a great idea. The other thing that, or another thing, there's many things we're thinking of, but another one is the preservation recruitment letters. What this involves is, so the HPAC, committee we're planning on reaching out to more of the historical homeowners, just in an effort to recruit more properties, and mainly south of Mountain Avenue. So, many of the other properties, of course, are located on Mountain Avenue and in other parts of town. But we devised kind of a grid. We're working on a grid, south of Mountain Avenue, and we kind of started that process where the grid is where we go out on the street, right? So, and we do an assessment or kind of an evaluation, right, and that. So we began that process because obviously we want to move throughout the community and make sure that any other property owners that can be part of, landmark preservation, historic landmark preservation, be a part of that. So a thing there that we want to extend that out to that area of town. Another thing that we are looking into is, it's been done in the past a little bit. We're looking at trying to improve the information distribution in 2022. So part of what this looks like is just start out by distributing just information booklets, right, to every property owner that will explain exactly what it means to own a historical landmark. Sometimes, in the past, again, I've only been a member a short time, but I do know from the other committee members that can be a different perception of what it's meant to be a historical landmark. And in some other communities, even NOCO, but other communities, where there's some pretty heavy restrictions and that are placed on being a historical landmark. Some of these can even be restrictive enough to where homeowners even fear some kind of restriction with like insurance and that. Okay, and so those have been concerns in the past. So we're trying to get out there and we want to not change that perception, but for Berthoud, it's less restrictive, part of that. And we also want it to be an education tool, right? So that if people are aware of maybe other communities and their historical landmark policies and that please, we'll help educate you about Berthoud's, policies for historic landmark properties. So that is something we feel really important to get out there and do that. So the next thing, and actually I touched on this a little bit already, is the vacant. So we have 2 vacant positions on the committee. So again, we really want to get out there and recruit a couple of people. We have a fantastic team already with Kathy and Cheryl and Nikki and Earl and of course Adam. And so, and again, I have the pleasure, I'm excited myself to be the chair and I hope to contribute a lot. I've got a great passion for the community and I'm really looking forward to it in 2022. So again, I want to just thank the Board of Trustees, just having the opportunity to, kind of represent, residents and that of the community for, this committee. And with that, and just being able to protect the historic character that makes Berthoud just a great place to live, right? So that is the conclusion of our presentation for the HPAC for 2021 and 2022.
Thank you very much. Questions, trustees? I have one. I brought this up to the board before. I don't know if I got all the way to you, but I had a plaque installed on 648 Welch in early fall, and the plaque's already fallen off the stand. And this isn't just a personal question. I'm sure this might happen to others, but what's the process of getting that fixed?
If you just wanted to reach out to me, we can make that happen.
Great.
I'll volunteer to fix Will's.
He was the first
Thank you, John.
installer.
I
Can we use
appreciate
something
that.
other than glue?
Galen.
No.
Galen Burkoff
Yeah.
has a welding business.
Excellent. Okay, let's do
I'm
something
on
like
it,
that.
I'm on it.
I think welding's the way to go. All right, thank you. That was it. Comments? Thank you. I think this is a fantastic commission. It's really exciting to see the preservation of Berthoud history growing, and I think it's really important too.
I think I have one comment. Just I'm happy to see the communication segment of that, because I think that'll actually help in the future as far as revoking or people wanting to revoke their membership. So I'm glad to see that.
That's the idea, yep. Be able to make sure everybody's well aware of everything going on and that they, there's no funny business going on with anything, so.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thanks, everyone. Finally got the camera working, so. That's the end, right? Yeah.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the annual committee reports. And before, let's just move right into the broadband report and recommendations by our Economic Development Manager, Walt Elish.
Being out there at the barn. Those are good.
Thank you, Mayor. All the members of the board. In your packet is information regarding the broadband analysis that has been taking place over the past 10 months. We started this back in March of 2021, and by we, I mean the towns of Berthoud, Johnstown, Meade, and Milliken. Early on, we decided that it was in the best interest of all of us to work together in order to try to secure broadband in not only in each of our respective communities, but in the region as a whole. Because individually, our communities, are not individually, we're not that big of a community in terms of population base. But together, we could form a nice block and make us attractive to a potential provider. And that's basically what has happened. So tonight, what I'm going to do is quickly go through the analysis and steps that we got to get to this point. Tim Scott, who was zooming in, he was basically our owner's rep, because early on what the four communities figured out after we begun the process is, hey, we know a little bit about broadband and fiber infrastructure, but we really don't know enough to ask the appropriate questions and to the respective consulting firms we were going to be talking to. So as a group, we decided to go out and try to secure the services of a consulting firm who could help us analyze the various things that we needed to do. And so it's basically an owner's rep that represented the four towns. And Tim Scott of Peakview Enterprises, who has worked in a number of other Colorado communities doing the same type of feasibility analysis, has been working with us since about the June of 2021. So we started the process. As I said early on, we decided to work together, which has been really an exciting endeavor, working with my colleagues, Chris's colleagues, in the three other communities. We decided we needed to do an RFP to hire a consulting firm to help us do a feasibility analysis. Tim Scott helped us put those questions together, put the RFP on the street, asked the appropriate questions to those respondents, and we decided on Magellan Advisors. Magellan has worked in a number of other different communities, not only in Colorado, but Nebraska and around the country, doing this same type of analysis. And so they've been very helpful to work, very beneficial and helpful to work with us. During that feasibility process, we did surveys in each of our communities, and we received about 1,700 surveys from across the 4 communities, responding to how do you like your internet service? What do you think about the speed? What do you think about the pricing? Would you consider moving on to another company, or what would that take for you to change service? And so all of these questions, and hopefully you all had a chance to see that and answer and respond to some of those questions. So after we received that information back, and there was a meeting over in Johnstown that I think Chris and 2 of you went over and participated in. And at that meeting, it was explained this whole process once again. And the best course of action at that time that was explained was for us to go out and secure, as a group, a firm that could provide not only the service, quality service, but it could install and fund the broadband infrastructure without any financial expense to the towns. Make the service available to all of our communities, every household in each one of our communities, that could install this infrastructure across our 4 communities at the same time. Because what we didn't want to have happen was we hire this firm to fund and install the infrastructure, and say they start in Meade, work their way through Meade, then go to Milliken, then go to Johnstown, and go to Berthoud. And by the time they get to Berthoud, it's 5 years later, 6 years later. And we said that wasn't going to work. We needed a firm that could start the process, start all these infrastructure work in all of our communities at the same time. So the project would be completed in all of our communities in 2 to 3 years. And then after going through all of this analysis, we shortlisted 3 firms that we felt could do that. And the firm we decided on as a group was LO Communications. LO is working in a number of other communities currently. They're in Greeley as we speak, providing service. Greeley just brought them into their community. And so as a result of all of this process, staff has recommended to the board that you all allow Chris, in partnership with his colleagues in Meade, Milliken, and Johnstown, to enter into an MOU with LO Communications. Now, I went through that pretty quick, and I'm sure you have questions about how and why, what's it going to cost, why didn't we maybe think about doing this on our own as a town of Berthoud, as Longmont has done, as Loveland is doing, as Fort Collins is doing. So the question may come up, well, why not Berthoud? Well, there's a reason for that. It's very expensive, very expensive. So now what I'd like to do, Tim Scott, who is here with us, has agreed to present to you. Hopefully his presentation, it's pretty brief, will answer your questions. After Tim presents, then Chris and I and Tim will be here to answer any further questions you may have. So with that, Tim, are you on the Zoom?
I am, Walt. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Great. That's super.
Tim, can you see the screen?
Yeah, now I can. So, good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving us the time to give you an update on this, and thanks, Walt, for the introduction. So as mentioned, my name's Tim Scott. I'm an independent consultant that has worked in this sort of municipal broadband space for some time. And I'll also be introducing in a few slides John Honker, who is the CEO of Magellan Advisors, and they actually they did a survey that we'll talk about across the 4 towns in terms of people's interest and feedback on broadband services, and also provide some sort of cost analysis of what this type of new broadband, or really what we should talk about, which is the real pieces here is this new fiber infrastructure that would be required across the 4 towns, and the cost of that infrastructure. So happy to be here, and we can go to the next slide, and I'll give you some feedback. So, this is the quick agenda. So we're going to talk a little bit about the background to the Four Towns approach, sort of why we sort of set it up this way. And then I'll summarize the recommendation that was made for a new provider to come and build this new infrastructure for the Four Towns. And then, as I said earlier, Magellan will cover a little bit about broadband overview as it relates specifically to Berthoud in terms of feedback today from the surveys, and a little bit specifically about some costs that are associated with the town of Berthoud as well. And then, on this topic, we're pretty used to lots of questions and answers, so I'm sure we'll have some questions as well. Next slide, please. So, really the key here is broadband has really become, in many ways, the hot topic for communities across the whole United States, and for many, both cities, towns, local governments in Colorado as well. Obviously COVID changed the dynamics a little bit because we had everybody working from home, and, we had issues where school kids in certain communities didn't even have access to the internet. So, the focus on broadband is very much a hot topic. I think just the quick takeaway should be that fiber is really the enabler of key broadband infrastructure for the next 30, 40 years. It's all about how do you get fiber in the ground, how do you get fiber connected to premises. So in terms of acronyms, what you might hear a little bit about in this presentation is fiber to the premise or fiber to the home, and that's when you're bringing fiber infrastructure that's getting built in the public right away, and you're actually bringing it to homes or to businesses, to specific premises. So that's the focus, and that's the focus of many towns and communities across the US at the moment. The next point, I think, is this sort of a common point that we came to in our dialogue, with the Four Towns, which is basically that competition is a good thing, right? Like, competition in any industry drives better results. And unfortunately, when you talk about competition in the wireline world, it's pretty limited. I mean, really, we have communities such as, Berthoud, where you have an incumbent phone company and you have a cable provider, and you don't really have that much else. And that's very typical across the United States. So really, this whole new world where, maybe a third competitor or even a fourth competitor in the wireline sector. So what we mean there is the wireline that goes to your home or your business or to your premise is really what many towns and cities and local governments are looking to try to achieve. How do we facilitate more competition in this wireline space? And I often say to people, like, compare your broadband at home to your mobile phone. Everybody has a smartphone. Everybody has, several providers that they can pick and choose from to get those services. But that's not the same as it relates to the wireline business. So more competition is a good thing, and many local governments are understanding that and trying to facilitate more competition in the wireline space. So what did we do? We undertook an investigation to understand the current market feedback, the survey. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about some of the costs that also came as a result of that. And the next point I think is really important, which is really that, across this whole project, the Four Towns stood firm in the fact that they would be best served by working together in this initiative. So Four Towns increased our total population, increased the total serviceable market, and provided, better synergies for private sector companies to come and be, this is a potential project that would be interested in. There were some other sort of shared common objectives, and that was that any new provider that was offering internet services, they needed to be reliable. We certainly had cases where reliability was an issue that came up in the surveys, that any new internet services must be competitively priced. There was no point in being the facilitator of potentially more competition and having those prices not be competitive. And certainly the last point here is really important too. All the towns agreed that the service has to be available to everybody within their town. They didn't want any winners and losers in their town. They didn't want anybody to get left behind. So those were some key points that were commonly understood across all the 4 towns, as we worked on this plan. And important too, there's just other use cases for this fiber asset, whether it's connecting to utility plants or traffic signals. There are definitely other municipal purposes that will come about as a result of a project just like this. So next slide, please. So after many months of discussions, reviewing our survey feedback and estimated costs, and just to give you an example, so the sort of the high level engineering cost to build a brand new fiber infrastructure that would connect the 4 towns and build out to a serviceable number within each of the 4 towns is a capital of investment potentially in around $60 million. And after sort of going through different options of understanding that model and that approach, I think the conclusion was that it would be best for the towns to understand what interest would come from the private sector that do that as their business, that understand that, they understand internet, they understand triple play services, and they have the financial capability to make that type of new capital investment, which is what was required. As part of our process, we reviewed and discussed with 13 different companies that is their business of being in this fiber to the premise and provider of internet as being their business in that space. From those 13, we shortlisted 3 companies based on their experience and ability to both finance and successfully operate and deploy the new services. From those finalists that made the in-person interviews, those 3 companies, I would say it was pretty clear that a firm, a Nebraska-based Allo Communications, that they clearly demonstrated both the required technical experience, the ability to successfully finance the project, and have the local knowledge and expertise to deploy a new fiber system, that would expand across the 4 towns and yet be local within each town, that they were pretty much head and shoulders, above the other 3, or the other 2, sorry, in terms of their ability to execute on this type of infrastructure investment. Where we're at currently is that the town council are all getting briefed by the various towns. I noticed earlier in the call that we have some representatives from the various towns attending this evening, so appreciate that. Those briefings and recommendations were occurring during January and February, and getting a sort of thumbs up from those briefings would result in further discussions with Allo to put together an MOU type agreement or something similar by the end of March in 2022. Next slide, please.
Yeah, Tim, before you move on, on that point, Milliken, Meade, and Johnstown all approved to move forward with the MOU, assuming that we're going to go along with them. Johnstown approved it last night at their town board meeting. Milliken and Meade approved it, I believe, last week.
Yeah, thanks, Walt. So basically, I think, my point as Walt had sort of said was really this sort of owner's rep role, to sort of understand the difference of the private sector approaches and what the 4 communities could do. I made a pretty clear recommendation that I felt that a private sector model where they could come in and make this type of capital investment and have the operational know-how how to run this type of new infrastructure, having demonstrated success in similar communities in Colorado was probably the best outcome for the 4 towns. And then separately to my recommendation was Magellan Advisors, and I'm going to pass it over to John Honker, and he'll talk about their experience and their expertise in this space as well, and how they sort of concurred with a recommendation, and then he can also give some specifics as they apply to the community of Berthoud as well. So hopefully John is online, and I'm going to pass it over to John.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tim, and good evening, City Council and Mayor. Would appreciate the time, and just to kind of reinforce what Tim was saying, as we looked at the needs in Berthoud and the 4 towns, I think as Tim said, one of the important aspects of this was really the strength in numbers and looking at the four towns together as being a greater force in aggregating internet demand to attract potential providers coming into the market, new providers that would build fiber infrastructure similar to what you have in communities like Longmont, Loveland, and Fort Collins, right? State-of-the-art fiber infrastructure that provides, generally higher speeds and better reliability to residents and businesses. So that as we looked at that, obviously a big part of that was trying to attract that private sector interest, but also really part of our analysis was to look at what would the overall costs be, because we understand that in some cases the cities want to know if they are going to move forward with any broadband strategy, what would it cost for them to do it directly? And part of the analysis was really look at the overall costs and try to assess what if the towns decided they wanted to do something, or if the town decided it wanted to become an ISP similar to Longmont, what that might look like. So if we actually move forward to the end of the presentation, we can kind of share some of those costs with you, because I think it's important to kind of set a baseline. And the slide 7 really shows what it would take for the city to become an ISP, the city of Berthoud alone. Now, as Tim mentioned, the overall costs for the 4 towns are upwards of $60 million. That means really building fiber optic infrastructure through every street in every town, and then connecting those 4 towns together with what we call sort of a fiber ring or a backbone. Berthoud's portion of that cost is about $16 million, right? And this is really, why is it so costly to build? Because you're really laying fiber underground using directional boring and trenching, right? Digging up the right of way and installing fiber in that right of way along almost every street in the town. So, this is expensive stuff, and it's of course labor intensive and capital intensive. This slide really shows you what those costs would be if the city were going to invest in it directly and potentially become an ISP, right? Total cost about $16 to $17 million, most of which is based on fiber construction. We talk about fiber distributions and fiber drops, which are really the equivalent of your water or sewer system, or your equivalent of an electric system that reaches every premise, every home and business in the city. Along with that, of course, the electronics, vehicles, software, all the capital that's needed to run a system like this. And then it becomes a question of financing, not only financing that capital, but then actually making the system work and making the system function competitively in the market, right? Because you do have competition. So as we looked at all of these different, we looked at these different options for the towns, we wanted to understand what those costs would be, because I think it's important for you to understand what those costs would be, for the town, for Berthoud itself. But this is really why we felt your best path forward is really to try to engage with a private sector provider, and through this sort of RFI process, or through this development process, and finding these providers, now actually getting to a point where a significant and a very high quality provider has stepped up to the table and said they're going to finance this. We see that as a very valuable position for Berthoud and the other 3 towns to be in, because it takes that capital risk off the table, it takes the operating risk off the table, and you have potentially a provider at your doorstep that's working in Colorado today with other communities like Fort Morgan, and has a track record behind them of being successful working with other municipalities. So again, wanted to show these costs to you as a an understanding of what it would take if the city wanted to become an ISP, and then help you understand that and contrast that against the opportunity of going with a provider. So beyond the cost, we also have, of course, the operations. We have the management. We have sales and marketing. All those other activities that have to happen for potentially a city to become an ISP, and cities do it all the time, right? You have 3 of your neighbors are doing it today. It can be done. It's not impossible if the political will and the organizational structure is set up the right way, and the city is committed to moving forward and committing to success of a retail ISP business. But as we see it right now, because there's not a lot of background in it, there's you're really the towns are somewhat at a starting point still. We think, and I think our recommendation still holds, that the partner bringing in this new ISP is in your best interests above and beyond all else. So I'm really kind of seconding what Tim said with a little bit more detail. Tim, now might be a good time to kind of ask or answer some questions from Berthoud's mayor and council.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, John. Yeah, so with that said, and with having some of those slides there as background, I guess we'd love to hear what questions and concerns you may have.
Questions?
I've got a bunch, but
I have a couple.
I'm supposed to go first.
Okay, go ahead, Trustee Stevens.
I keep hearing it's a no cost. How do you pay for 60 million if there's no cost?
The company.
The company pays for that?
Allo Communications.
Yeah,
Okay,
Allo.
and then to get the fiber optics to the homes or businesses, that'll be part of their plan or whatever, okay?
Yeah, so I think the simple way to think about that is in this case, the private sector partner, the recommended private sector partner, they're taking on all the capital investment, and they're taking on all what we call the market risk. So whether they get to the take rate that they need to get to make their numbers work, that sits squarely with the private sector partner.
Okay, now with other utilities, I know once like electrical or gas lines are in, other companies can piggyback off of that. I forget what that's called. But would that be possible with fiber optics as well, where a competitor could actually jump in and use the fiber optics that's in place?
I think the way to think of it in this case, because you used the word competitor, that's unlikely. It's unlikely that you could regulate or request in a case like this where the partner's taking all the capital risk and all the market risk, that they make their infrastructure investment available to what we would call direct competitors. Now, I think the way to think of it is there opportunities to work with that partner to get that investment to other points that may be of benefit to the municipality? Absolutely. So like connections to public safety or connections to, water utility and other things as an example. But it's very rare to have one partner make all the infrastructure investment, take all the risk, make the bet, so to speak, and then have them open that up for other competitors.
I think I'm maybe not phrasing the question quite right. In the natural gas industry, when I worked for KN Energy, we would install main lines, and then Excel could actually take over those lines. Is internet or fiber optics a whole different entity or a whole different set of rules?
No, I mean, what you're saying is correct, but in this case, the public sector, so the local governments are not making any of the investment. So they're not making any of the investment in the fiber main lines and then having the private sector do sort of what we call the drops or the last mile. In this case, the private sector partner is doing everything. So the mainline investment, the drops, all of it. And that's why it's unlikely that some sort of request for them to share that with others would be appropriate. Just like if you ask the cable company to share their stuff with others, it doesn't really happen.
Okay. That kind of makes sense, but I remember there being lawsuits and issues with that years ago when that first was became available. But anyway, I'm not going to.
And that might be back to if they, like for instance, took federal funding to do that to build that new infrastructure.
Maybe that was,
but in this case, this would be all privately funded.
All right. And would somebody explain dark fiber to me?
So dark fiber, think of it as literally the cable in the ground. So 80% of the cost is putting what we call dark fiber into the ground. So that's the underground construction, putting conduit, which is, you know, your 2-inch typically plastic case, and then within that plastic case runs a cable, usually about 1 inch or so, 1.25 inches, and that cable is the cable that has your strands of fiber.
Okay.
And
so it's not like
those strands of physical fiber, are referred to as dark until you add electronics, which lights them up and sort of makes them highly technical, like highly capable. Otherwise, they're just literally a cable in the ground.
All right. That's really all I have. Thank you.
Trustee Grace.
I guess, first of all, I was at the October meeting with the mayor. I know with the short list going on, Pulse for Loveland was, I think, kind of what everybody thought was going to happen. Could you explain what happened, why that didn't really pan out like we thought it would?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good question. I think the complexities of them investing outside of their utility district and being able to fund a type of new infrastructure like this, you know, beyond their boundaries, maybe for lack of a better term, was a gray area. I think that's how I would summarize it. Certainly there has been a focus whereby, you know, most of their businesses is directly within the city. They have expanded out into the county, I believe, on some specific opportunities, but sort of going from that to, okay, we need to look at funding $50-60 million to build into 4 towns that are outside of our, you know, municipal electric footprint was a whole different, you know, ball game. And I think the conclusion was there was just going to be a lot of time and complexity invested on trying to even determine if that was feasible or not. John, I don't know if you want to add to that, but.
No, I think that summed it up well. I think we just felt that there were a number of lingering questions that would be very, very difficult to get clear answers to when there's other providers at the table that can give those clear answers. And, you know, it wasn't sort of a situation where it was, you know, Loveland or no one else. It was sort of, you know, looking at the short list of the providers and then picking the best out of those. And we felt that although Loveland was very qualified, some of those big ticket items were really not answered yet. And we didn't feel that could be done relatively quickly. We thought it would be a relatively long process for those answers to be actually, you know, decided on, either, you know, whether that was through City Loveland Council or the electric board or something else.
So essentially, it was just too much risk for them to take on at any given time at this point. Now, did they, when it kind of came up to them, was it one of those where they actually kind of excused themselves from the running, or was it just their answers or lack of answers that disqualified them?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think the reality was that if you look at this process, everybody wants to move quickly. And when I say everybody, I mean the 4 towns, from what, our engagement with town staff, any private sector partner, everybody's goal is to move quickly because everything takes time. Like, to build this new infrastructure will probably take 2 years. So what we didn't want to do was spend a year going through legal fees that were unaccounted for in a model, as an example, trying to determine, is somebody like Loveland able to do this, and what would it look like, and how would they come to the table with this type of funding? Whereas on the other side, we had private sector partners that were funded and ready to go.
Sure. Yeah, and I know going through the packet, Allo definitely, they seem to be a little bit more forward thinking when it came to having their supply chain relatively figured out, the ability to drop cable and keep moving. I guess kind of to go back to this, and this is mostly a concern based around private versus public. At the meeting in October, you brought up how it was kind of like a good, better, best model, where goods, where we just kind of let them do their thing and eventually they'll make their money back just by selling people using their internet. Better would be where we chip in a little bit more, be it taxes or what have you, and the best would be, arguably, if we could just snap our fingers and magically it's here. My question for you is, with Allo, is that something we can do? Is there a good, better, best, or is it they're owning it and selling the subscription only? Or can we chip in? Is there something we can do to provide co-ownership of this? Is that an option on any front?
Again, it's a great question. I think where we are at the moment is the very first model that you said, which is more of the, it's an invitation to come and invest the type of dollars that we've talked about and go run at the market and, as you said, go and compete. We absolutely could look at a sort of, as you say, well, what's the interim step? Obviously, Bertha doesn't want to, put in $60 million, but if it put in X, what could they get as an outcome of X? I think, to be fair to Allo, they are very open to those conversations, but we haven't had the necessity to have them yet. The key points that we've talked about are kind of what was in my slides earlier, which is basically around, okay, we want these new fiber services, we want it to be competitively priced, and basically we can see in the market that they are competitively priced, so similar products and services to what they're offering in other, towns and cities. We want it to be pervasive in each town so that we don't leave anybody behind. There was 3. I'm pulling a blank on what the third one was, but it's sort of still at those early stages, but the ability to sort of cooperate and do more is absolutely there. We just haven't had clear direction on what that might be.
Okay, so when it comes back to us later, we'll have that information as to what options we have as a town. Because one of the big concerns and problems with bigger ISPs, as I'm sure you guys understand as well, is, something goes wrong, you're kind of stuck. You can't go to a different provider because there isn't really nothing with viable options. And while I have no problem with Allo, and I think it's great that they're willing to come in and work with us, my concern is we're just going to be going from one frying pan to another, seeing as they're not even based out of the area. Now, I want to go with it. I'm interested in getting this moving. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we have a little bit more insight and control over it. So hearing that you guys are going to report back with what options we can do is very helpful.
I think, Trustee Grace, if I can add to your comment, which I think is a good one. Our goal here, I think, is really to increase access to broadband, right? And the 4 towns working together created a situation where it's attractive enough for Allo to come in and make this kind of investment, right? And so, while we won't have direct control over that service, we're increasing access and competition in the marketplace, both with the goal of providing a service that may not be available in a lot of areas in these towns, including ours, and also creating a situation where you're not just stuck with one provider. Right, where there are situations in town now where you have one option or no option. And so, again, I think our goal is to increase access That's very different, I think, than building a broadband utility, right, that we have a lot of control and influence over. And so that becomes a policy decision, I think, from a town's board perspective, but certainly from a staff's perspective, we think the best option for today is to work with a private provider who's willing to make the investment, provide the service, build out across all 4 towns, and increase the access to a service that maybe there's limited access to today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the big goals we had, I think, 2020, 2021 as well, to get this whole thing going. And I actually did have a question regarding kind of more the remote areas, like no winners or losers, was I believe what you were saying in the presentation. Not how far away from, I guess, town is this thing viable? Is that a question for Allo?
That's really a question for Allo, I think. Outside of the town limits, we won't have any influence over that. If they choose to extend the network out into the areas of the county around town, more power to them. And I think we would certainly support them doing that, right, for the community as a whole. But outside of town limits, we won't have any influence, control, or really any direction to them. That'll be purely a business decision for Allo. Same would be true if it were the town of Berthoud creating a broadband utility. Our focus would be town limits.
Sure. Yeah. I guess just to kind of go back to last question I have for you, back in October, you're saying you can get this, the idea is once this is all fully approved, about 2 years is what you're saying. Is there any idea of who's going first, or is it all 4 simultaneously?
We've talked to them about the reality that, of course, we don't want to spend, 12 months building one town and the other town hasn't even got started. So I think what is very good about a company like Allo is they're very experienced around construction too. They understand that, yeah, of course, for them to build the right reputation, across the 4 towns. They want to do the best possible job to start consecutively. And whether that's, 2 towns at once or 3 towns at once, we don't really have an answer at this stage. We've provided the high-level engineering and the high-level costs, but they will create their own detailed, engineering plans, construction plans, cost plans. And yeah, we will encourage them to move, as correctly in one direction to build across all 4 as we can. But yeah, again, it's a little bit limited, but they understand that concern and we've discussed it and they're sensitive to it.
Okay, that's all I have.
Other questions?
I have one follow-up, kind of still in the same kind of same theme as that, or what I was talking about earlier. So what you're saying is, if this all comes to fruition and we have the fiber optics, we still could, any customer could still pay a Comcast subscription. They have that. This new Allo would probably create some competition, and so that would be a beneficial thing. The point I was trying to make earlier, would Comcast in that scenario be able to rent fiber optic time, space, whatever it is, from Allo? Or is that's kind of what I was, or would it just still be a cable issue?
Yeah, no, I understand your point now. And the reality is, while that sounds sensible to everybody that doesn't do this, the reality is Company X very rarely leases from Company Y. That's just the way it is. They build their own infrastructure, they overbuild their own infrastructure, they want to own their own infrastructure, control that, provide services over infrastructure that they build. So it is very unlikely that any private sector party would lease from Allo in this model. That's not to say it couldn't be done. It absolutely could be done, and they would look at it and say, yeah, we can do stuff like that. But the reality is the cable guy has built his cable plant and provides services over his cable plant. And the phone company has done a similar thing over his predominantly copper plant. This is just ensuring that we have, as you said, more competition coming into the market, and now you're going to have a new competitor that's building his fiber plant.
Okay, yeah, that clears a lot up for me, so thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, thank you very much for the answers thus far. My questions, I have a few in succession, so please bear with me. So the first option, where Allo builds the infrastructure. They put in the infrastructure, they set their rates. Their rates, I heard, was market rate. Currently, what is market rate here? And with that, what reduction would what reduction in rates would competition create, or what has been historically seen? So are we looking at, with competition, the rates might go down 10%? Is that what we've seen before, or they've seen before? And can someone tell me what is the current market rate in Berthoud?
John, do you want to tackle the current Berthoud rates?
Yeah,
And I can maybe tackle what I think might happen.
Sure, and of course, those rates fluctuate to some degrees, and packages with each one of the providers change. But typically, you'll have a couple of rates for service in Berthoud. So, Comcast cable service, has a couple of different speeds, right? There's a higher speed broadband service and a lower speed. Those rates will average sort of in the $60 to $70 range. And then there's also an Internet Essentials package, which is much less expensive and is also subsidized by the federal government, which is in the $20 to $30 range. So those are typically what your ranges are. And of course, those rates are averages. So those change a little bit with promotional packages, with contract lengths. There's a lot of things that keep those, but those are generally the established rates that are out there. Now, when you have a new provider coming into town, they're going to, their goal is to connect as many customers as quickly as possible. So, and the competition's objective is to protect their turf and, keep as many of their existing customers as they possibly can. So what we will see is we'll see new promotional packages come out from the existing providers that will reduce rates, not necessarily in an organic way, not in a way that where they're going to stabilize over time at lower rates. They may promo that for a year or 2 years, but we'll also see the new provider coming into town, market its higher speeds, because typically a fiber provider like an Allo will market higher speeds at the same or slightly lower costs. And as you mentioned, 10% is about where we usually see those prices come in from the new provider, potentially about 10% lower than market, but with significantly higher speeds.
Excellent. Okay,
Tim, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that's a good summary. I think what new competition typically brings is, as opposed to creating a whole host of lower cost products, what it tends to do is it just brings better products for a similar price point into the market. And what I mean by better is you typically see true high-speed broadband. So think of 1 gig type services to the home. You might hear stuff about like synchronous, which means the ability to upload as well as download at that speed is something you can obviously do over fiber. So it brings a more compelling product for a similar price point, as opposed to fundamentally changing the market and suddenly having lots of lower cost products. And the other thing that's important is, with the recommendation that we made of Allo, they are also a provider that can provide the new federally funded programs that are, some of which are being rejigged and rolled out under the new Biden infrastructure bill, so that, the lower income products, subsidized products and stuff are available, and they're very much part of that whole process to make sure that they offer those in the market as well.
Okay, so the subsidized products, such as the $20 to $30 essential plan provided by Comcast, there would be some sort of subsidized product through Allo as well?
Yes, correct. They are part of that, and John might be a little bit more up to date on all the different acronyms than I am, but Allo is part of that process too. It's just they're doing it over a new fiber-based system. But I do think the federal payment is changing to a $50 a month as opposed to $30. Is that right, John?
It's going up. So the Affordable Connectivity Program right now gives qualifying customers a $30 a month discount on their internet service, and they're talking about increasing that to $50.
Okay, so I'd like to move on then. So this leads to my question about increasing access. So when you say increases access, it increases physical access, but not financial access.
I think the financial question is maybe subjective. You know, when you look at, you know, if you just do a search of like current rates, like between Xfinity and Allo, and I think what I can't remember if it was Tim, but I think it was Tim that was articulating, like oftentimes what you'll see is a higher quality service for a similar price.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It's not uncommon for Xfinity. I mean, you can go on their website, just punch in an address and get their local deals, you know, where you might pay $50 a month for 100 megs or 100 meg service. And I'm not a internet pro, right? But, and you might go to Allo and theirs might be $60 for 500 megs, right? 5 times the service for $10 more. So you know, financial access is always an interesting question. It's a little bit like when we talk about water rates, right? Like, well, what's an affordable water rate? Well, the answer to that question is different for everyone.
Well, I'm just kind of looking at the baseline. So I know that quite a few people here on the town board, we really are looking forward to having faster internet and more consistent internet, without you know, pushing out some of the excellent providers that we already have in town here. However, there is some sensitivity on my part for people who maybe this is a very large part of their budget, and to say that, you know, $50 a month is the subsidized price, and it's a lower level of speed, and maybe they have multiple kids trying to do homework or are online all at the same time. Okay, it's not like gaming, okay? We know gaming sucks up a lot of bandwidth. But so I just want to be price sensitive to those in our community who are going to need to rely on something that's truly affordable, unlike Comcast that does have these promotions for a year or two and then the rates, you know, bounce back up. So then this kind of wraps back to what Trustee Grace mentioned that I would like to also know when talks go further on. So one option is to do market rate. Another option, would they be open to some level of investment from the town in that original fiber network to reduce the price point for our town in general, to help further reduce the price point for those citizens who need the basic but need a little help. And then some sort of, I just threw down co-ownership with Allo. So just is there, and then also I have no idea exactly what this term means, so please forgive me. Franchise fees, that sort of thing. I don't know if that has anything to do with this. If it's totally unrelated, my apologies, but franchise fees to help bring down, again, the cost, to potentially make it more advantageous for certain members of our community.
So franchise fees won't bring the cost down typically because a franchise fee is a fee that the town collects from the
Right.
provider.
Okay, thank you.
So that gets passed on to the customer, right?
And that's
The provider doesn't just eat that. Now, we may choose, maybe we say, we'll waive franchise fees if you bring the cost down. Maybe that's a way to do that. But I think all of those conversations are are part of the discussions we can have moving forward for sure. And we've talked about all of those same things already internally.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'm done.
Right, other questions?
I have some questions.
Okay.
My questions are for staff. So I am a small town girl and I have preference toward our local businesses, especially knowing that Hilltop, I know we worked with them at the fire department, and I know that they've laid an extensive amount of fiber under the new developments. I thought they worked with the town and the rec center. I know they work with a great deal of our community members already, and they're amazing stewards in this community. So have we had any discussion with them, and why aren't they at this conversation? I think those are my questions.
We did. Excuse me. I met with Eric, and Eric has also met with the town of Johnstown. Expressed that, but I think from the four communities perspective, when you look at the cost of providing service to all four communities at relatively the same time, the cost of $60 million, we looked at firms that could do that relatively quickly. And we felt the three that we shortlisted could, with Allo rising to the top and indicating to us that they could get this all done. They would bring all the financing to the table and be able to build out this service in 2 to 3 years. So we're looking at the bigger picture within all four communities.
Let's see. I would agree with Trustee Grace when he mentioned that there is concern in one entity having the preference and what that will do as far as our ability to have a say and perhaps the customer's ability if the other entities are not able to compete.
If I can clarify though, that this isn't a preference-based decision. What we're talking about is working together as communities to create a standard set of requirements for a provider like Allo to come in and go through expedited permitting, be able to put in infrastructure. Those same things would be available to any other provider. We're not making a financial investment. This is not an exclusive franchise with Allo that prohibits other providers. If Hilltop had $60 million, maybe they do. But if they wanted to come in and build out a similar network, we could offer the same exact kind of situation to them in terms of being able to expedite permitting. And I hate to use the term grease the skids, but that's really the investment that we're making, is trying to make it as easy as possible for this broadband provider to come in to all four communities at the same time and build out a network. Again, it's not exclusive. There's no investment from the town, and other providers could do the same thing. So we've prioritized working with Allo in the short term to work through that process. This is not an exclusive agreement that prohibits other entities from coming in and using public utility easements under franchise to build out networks.
Yeah, and I would just add to that's exactly correct, and that's why, for instance, Allo would execute a franchise agreement because they will be providing, linear TV services, just like the cable guy has a franchise agreement. Allo would come in and execute the same, or a very similar franchise agreement, but essentially the same cost structure.
So Eric emailed me and also Walt and expressed his frustration. Is it correct that he never had the opportunity, that Rise never had the opportunity to bid on this? Hilltop, sorry, not Rise.
The opportunity to submit a proposal was open publicly.
Was that advertised to a local provider?
But I don't know. I didn't speak to Hilltop personally.
I didn't speak to him either.
He was pretty frustrated, and I could see some of that. I don't know how we did this bid, but it does make sense that, I wouldn't say preference, but we ensure that they have an opportunity. And it might come up that they're way higher, right? But that way we would know and we wouldn't move on without even knowing.
But again, I don't know that we didn't make a decision based on price or investment from the town. We made a decision, I think the recommendation, we haven't made a decision at all, right? You'll make that ultimate decision. If you don't want to work with Aloe and the other 3 towns, we don't have to do that. But the recommendation that's being made is Aloe is a company that can come in, made a proposal to the 4 towns. If you, without any investment from the towns, we will come in and build out a fiber network to the home, to every home in your community. We can do that in an accelerated timeline without any investment from you if you can help us with expedited permitting and all these kind of things that typically slow down the process.
Right. And that's nothing, I mean, let's
So,
run
you know,
Aloe
so
if you
again, you know, there's no preference for Aloe other than they said we can do this work, we can do it without your investment, and we can do it in a pretty quick time frame.
I think they're a great company. I mean, I brought them to you, Walt, in 2018, 2019, after a presentation. They are very flexible. I just want to make sure there's opportunities for everyone, or at least a chance on that.
But again, if Hilltop comes to us and says, we want to build out a fiber network in Berthoud with no investment from the town, and we want to do that in a very quick way, and we want to do that under franchise with you, we would have that conversation with them just like we did with Aloe.
Okay, well, maybe I should have referred that meeting I had with him on that email directly to you guys, because that's what essentially that meeting he had with me was. And this all feeds together. I mean, there's a ton of grant opportunities out, and one of the presenters addressed this with the Biden Act. I mean, there's communities getting full conduit. Forgot, it wasn't Superior, it's a tiny one out east. But it would be a shame if we didn't even go out for those, if this was purely privately driven and the towns didn't have an opportunity to try and reduce that cost. I think that wouldn't, I think we should look into that. So there should be some level of public interest in beyond just greasing the skids, but going out and getting some real dollars into this. That's it. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, that was good.
Trustee Hyman?
Well, I certainly can understand, I guess we're kind of doing discussion and questions, I guess.
Yeah.
So I can certainly understand the concerns, and one of my neighbors works for Hilltop. But I think what Chris has said is Hilltop has the ability to do exactly what this company's doing. It's just that Johnstown and the other 3 communities, or Berthoud, Johnstown, Milliken, and Meade are working together, which, as Walt said, pools more customers together and potentially makes it easier for them to expedite it. But if Hilltop wants to do that in Berthoud, they'd be doing the same thing that Aloe is doing, which is investing their own private dollars into building their business. So there's nothing that would stop them from doing the same thing that Aloe would do. But anyway, on a lighter note, my main question is, will this new service allow us to watch some of the most successful local sports teams in the country? Because right now I can't watch the Avalanche or the Nuggets or the Colorado Rapids with my current monopoly provider. And
Yeah,
do we have
so it's
any,
great. It's a great point, and you know that is a strong bow, I would say, in the quiver that Aloe has. Is they understand that they have local sports. Don't quote me on all the teams, but I do remember hearing them talk about the Avalanche in one of our presentations. So, you know, that is something again they're very sensitive to. So, you know, that's important, and we can give you the channel lineup and the fact that they are a provider that not only understands the benefit of internet, which is, you know, everybody's so focused on right now because of COVID and because of all these things, but, you know, their business is more than that. Like, people still want to sit down and watch, you know, the 9 o'clock news on Channel 9, and they want to be able to watch their sports teams. So it is an important piece. It's a very expensive business to be in the television game, but that's the business that they're in. It's very low margins, and they presented a very strong argument around their channel lineup, and that was absolutely part of our decision making and recommendation. And that's why, just sort of coming back to the conversation we just had, maybe over the last sort of 5 or 10 minutes, is, you know, I think a key point is, John and I have done this across many communities, you know, across the United States, and there's always good, really local businesses where they have a business that's focused on better broadband solutions, you know, whether it's fiber, wireless, combination of both. Those guys are not precluded by any steps that you're taking here, but you also need to look at the bigger picture, which is, it's not just about a new development, for instance, and building and funding a greenfield development. We're talking about building across, you know, 22,000 premises, right? And a very aggressive build, you know, sort of 2 years across the whole 4 towns. And about being big enough to A, fund everything, but B, also have some serious influence on the supply of materials that are required to actually build this infrastructure as well. So there's a lot of other items that are part of that recommendation, but certainly a track record and experience in this space of doing essentially big deals with governments is part of that recommendation.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point. So part of this, you know, the towns working together will mean that every house in each community will have access to service. You know, right now, I don't have access to anything other than Comcast, you know, Xfinity or satellite. I don't have access to any of the other small companies. And so, you know, going with a bigger company means that within 3 years, anyone who wants fiber can have it. And I don't know if Hilltop is fiber or if that's coax, but anyway, it's also important to note that this is a continuation of the process. We had to put a ballot initiative and get voter approval to explore this. So I think it's, you know, given that voters did support this, I think it's incumbent on us to continue to move the process forward. And you know, the difference between Loveland, Fort Collins, and Longmont is they have an electric utility. So they had a complete, you know, entity, an enterprise in their town government that's been around for whatever, 100 years. And that allowed them to very efficiently add on internet, which we're starting without that. So anyway, and then to Maureen's comment, you know, this is not a government subsidized program, right? This is private enterprise, and the competition cannot hurt, right? This isn't going to provide every single person with $15 a month internet, but it certainly isn't going to raise the prices, and it's, you know, it's no public investment, no taxpayer dollars. So I would support moving ahead.
So I really wish this was a study session, because with this, does this really need to, do we need to go to the ballot to have this conversation?
The ballot?
Yeah.
No.
So we didn't need to do that. We could have had this before we sent this to the people.
We did need to do this, I think.
Because there's no public participation in this, right?
Well, there isn't that we're spending money studying the issue, yeah.
Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think we need to clarify that the community voted that we explore this. They did not vote on this specific decision.
Sure.
They did not say, hey, go forward with this company and this MOU with these different towns. So I think we need to be really careful about making a decision for the community, especially when some of our community members aren't represented in this conversation. And that's my biggest holdup on this, is that I want to see our local entities properly represented and having a say before the board, and being able to present their options. And if it's better for us as a community to use our local entities and break off from having an MOU with other towns, and we need to be able and willing to make that decision. So I don't think this is what the community asked us for specifically.
The way I understand is that this is essentially something, you're just asking for us to give you permission to go and figure out, okay, they're gonna go get a lot more granular information of stuff we need to know before anything is actually done. This is essentially like, hey, can we go do this and get this built up for you and then present it back later with much more information?
The motion's an MOU. Yeah, it's an MOU.
It's to work with the 4 towns to put this project in place with ALLO. Again, if the board wants to do this and contract with Hilltop to build out a different network that we fund a portion of and compete with Allo, I suppose you could do that too. It's no different than competing with Comcast. Comcast is already in town. They already provide service in town. And if the board wanted to start its own broadband utility, we'd be competing with Comcast just like we'd be competing with Allo. So I don't know that the two are mutually exclusive. I think what we're suggesting is this is an opportunity to move forward in a very quick way to bring fiber to the home to every residence in town. If the board doesn't want to do that, we can work on building a broadband network, if that's the desire of the board. I don't think, from a staff perspective, we don't think that's the right thing to do. Not in the short term.
Before I open up public comment, do you have any desire or interest to look at these federal funds coming in from Biden for broadband?
We have $2 million in the bank that we can spend on broadband. We can spend it on lots of other things that have already come from the American Recovery and whatever it's called. I wanted to say ARA, but that was the old thing back in the recession.
That might have only been rural broadband, so I gotta look farther into it. Okay.
And so there are other grant opportunities. You know, building a broadband network is not as simple as putting fiber in the ground, right? We'd have to hire an entire entity, right? Directors, managers, field staff. It's a much bigger process than getting a grant and putting fiber in the ground. So I think we're talking about years out before we could even be in a position to make that a reality. Certainly not in with the kind of speed that I think Allo could deploy fiber through the 4 communities. Again, I don't know that those two things are mutually exclusive. If the board says we want to go after grant funds and build a broadband utility, that's something we can consider. I don't think they're exclusive from each other.
Okay, before.
It's a question for staff. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall in a discussion of the 4 separate towns and the distance between homes and the cost of the fiber between the homes, that Berthoud was the only community out of the 4 that could potentially have a reasonable payback period on an investment should we go for broke and try to do it ourselves. The other communities would not have an appropriate payback.
I don't recall those. I don't recall the specifics, but I do think that we were one of the in that analysis, and maybe Tim or John could speak to that. But that Berthoud had a higher potential for return on investment.
Return on investment. Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for.
All right, at this time, I'll open it up to the public.
Mayor?
Yes.
One more, just want to clarify. Who's the owner of Hilltop?
I think his name's Eric.
Eric. If Eric came to us tomorrow and said, I can do this for the town, just our town, at no cost to you, get it done in 3 years, would that make everybody happy?
He could do that, and so could Allo. They're not exclusive.
But I'm just saying, if we wanted to maintain a local business, if he could do that and he could say that, would that make everybody happy?
He can.
What's that?
He can.
He can do that?
I just don't think he had the opportunity to bid on all 4, which might have made the difference. Anyway.
Yeah, we were looking at a firm that could service all 4 communities at the same time.
Well, and I think it's fair to say that if there's one company providing service for all 4 towns, it's gonna put any other smaller business at a disadvantage, because they can't compete.
Not necessarily, not
I
necessarily.
mean, that would be like saying Comcast provides service in all 4 communities, and so Allo can't compete. Comcast is an enormous company.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's true. I think they may choose, maybe they look at it and maybe a company like Hilltop says, okay, there's some Comcast, portion of the market's already saturated with Comcast, now Allo exists, so it's not worth it for me to go and compete. That might be true. I don't know. I mean,
I think it's less of an issue of Allo coming into Berthoud and more of an issue of the town going into an agreement with one specific company that bothers me. That I think
again,
will
it's
set a
not an
tone.
exclusive agreement. I mean,
So let's open it up to public comment.
Yeah,
and then
I didn't
can
realize
have
we were
this.
gonna have public comments.
Well, there's an MOU, we're gonna vote on something here, so.
No, let's do that, and then I have some comments.
Okay, anyone in the public that wish to speak to this agenda item? We're online. Doesn't look like we have any.
There is nobody.
Okay, I'll close public comment, bring it back to the board. Trustee Hyman?
Well, yeah, so I think the difference is, so Hilltop, as far as I know, is providing, as either Tim or John mentioned, they're building out in the new neighborhoods. They're not going back and retrofitting the old existing neighborhoods, which is far more expensive to do. So the advantage of this bundling with the other towns in this agreement is that we're getting a company that's gonna come in and within a very short time frame provide service to every single business and dwelling that's far superior to the service that most of those have today. I think this is the history, right? We asked the voters for permission to explore this. They gave us permission. We directed our staff to develop a plan. They did. They came up with the idea to partner. They hired 2 experts that have done this all around the country that vetted the 13 proposals and came up with the 3, and out of the 3, Allo shined in comparison to the other 2. It's not an exclusive agreement. This is just to go out and say, we're gonna, as Chris said, we're gonna give you expedited permitting and right-of-way and all of that so that you can get started. This staff packet says that they could start construction this summer. So, anyway, and like I said, there's no downside to the town. There's no money that we're putting in, and the competition is not gonna raise the prices. So it's gonna give customers more options. So, anyway, if you guys wanna delay it for 2 weeks and give Hilltop an opportunity to say, sure, I can do that I can start this summer and I can have all of the town of Berthoud served by, in the next 2 years, then, probably waiting, but anyway, the memo says they're gonna have an agreement by the end of March so that construction can start this summer, and the other 3 towns have approved it. So I think we should stick with our partnership and move ahead, and like I said, it will definitely improve our current situation.
Okay, well, I've already made my points too. Is there anything else? Or does someone want to make a motion?
I appreciate the compromise of delaying until we can hear from the business owner.
The only question I have on that is, why isn't he here?
I don't know if he didn't get noticed again. I have no idea.
That bothers
I think he spoke in Johnstown last night.
Last night.
And Mayor, I didn't recognize Matt LaSurf. He's the town manager from Johnstown.
Thank you for coming
He's here
out.
tonight, and I'm sure he'd be happy to discuss Johnstown's experience. I think he did speak at Johnstown last night. I'd be surprised if he wasn't aware of tonight's meeting.
Eric, he was aware that we were meeting tonight.
He didn't show up, okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think this is personally, it's a step in the right direction. This is not the silver bullet. This is not the thing that's gonna make everybody happy. This is, let's continue this dialogue. Let's see what shakes loose. And if Hilltop wants to go drag more cable, there's no rule saying they can't. And it's not saying that he will never be able to, but like everybody else is suggesting, there's nothing stopping them either.
Yeah, if anything, this might put a spark in them to get moving a little faster on his side.
It continues the, let's keep this thing moving while we still have the chance to, so we have everybody else on board, all of our partners are in agreement. It's, I don't know, this is one of our board goals that we had when we were first, the new trustees took a seat. It was one of the first things we got, and it's finally kind of here in front of us. So while it's unfortunate that Hilltop, and we can't stay 100% local, didn't make the cut, they still can. They can still drag their own. They can put up their own satellite dishes if they wanted to. It is not exclusive, as everybody's been mentioning. So I think it's not the best option, but it's a really good option at the moment.
All right. We are over an hour and a half past our scheduled time. I think we should just
Okay,
go ahead for a
well,
motion.
I move to authorize staff to engage with Allo Communications in partnership with the towns of Meade, Milliken, and Johnstown in developing an MOU for broadband deployment in the town of Berthoud.
Second.
All right, we have a motion. It's been seconded. Any final discussion of this? All right, clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower,
Yes.
Trustee Grace,
Yes.
Trustee Stevens,
Yes.
Trustee Sorcelli,
No.
Trustee Hyman,
Yes.
Mayor Karsnick.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We're gonna have to go into an executive session, and then we will, I'm guessing we're going upstairs. Okay, then we'll come back down here afterwards. Would anyone like to move us into that?
Yeah, make a motion to go into executive.
Yeah, we need a motion.
Hey, could someone change it from city attorney to town attorney, please?
I'll move
Go for it.
I'll move to enter an executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 4B for a conference with the city attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions regarding the Second Amendment or amended and restated service plan for Turion Metropolitan District, numbers 1 through 21, and the intergovernmental agreement between the town of Berthoud and the Turion Metropolitan District, numbers 1 through 21, and pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 4EI to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiation, developing a strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators. And the following detail are provided: intergovernmental agreement between the town of Berthoud and the Turion Metropolitan District, numbers 1 through 21.
Second. Trustee Stevens has moved, trustee Grace has seconded. Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Sorcelli,
Yes.
Trustee Grace,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower,
Yes.
Trustee Hyman,
Yes.
Trustee Stevens,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Karsnick.
Yes, okay.
We saw no.
Time, call this to order. The time is now 10:06 and the executive session was concluded. The participants in the executive session were Administrator Clerk Attorney Smith, Trustee Hardy, Mayor Pro Tem Dower, Trustee Sorcelli, Trustee Stevens, Trustee Hyman, Trustee Grace, and Attorney Norton, and myself, Mayor Karsbeck. For the record, if any person who participated in the executive session believes that any substantial discussion of any matters not included in the motion to go into the executive session occurred during the executive session, or that any improper action occurred during the executive session in violation of the open meetings law, I would ask that you state your concerns for the record. Hearing none, let's move into item number 5 here. That's the second amended and restated service plan. This is a public hearing, and this is for, again, for the Turion Metropolitan Districts. And we left off at before public comment, right? So we're gonna reopen this where trustees, I don't know, what would you call that? Just general questions?
Yes, you left it off in the middle of questions after the applicant's presentation.
Okay.
So you can resume questions for the applicant's presentation or to the applicant, and then you can open it up for public comment.
Thank you very much. Okay. Welcome back. Thank you very much for sticking through that. Trustees, any questions, more questions for the applicants or staff?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay, Trustee Hyman.
So this is, every time I leave these meetings, I go home and about 2 hours later, I think of all the things I should have asked or thought of that I didn't think of at the meeting. So that happened after the last meeting, which is, I think, a good reason why we didn't make a decision last time. But the other concern that I have heard about with metro districts is the slow rate that residents and non-developer representatives get added to the boards of the metro districts. So can you tell us what provisions this service agreement would have that would ensure that, you know, that residents, as they move into the district, are included and promoted onto the boards?
Sure. When they become residents and are eligible electors of the district, meaning that they also are registered to vote in Colorado, they can, if there are vacant seats on the board, submit a letter of interest to be seated on the board, or they also have the opportunity to run in the next regular special district elections, which are held every other year. Right now, they're even year this year, but starting next year, they go into a 2-year odd year cycle. So they always have an opportunity to get on the board.
Are there provisions, any provisions that would mandate that or require that in a certain time frame? Because the as usual, there's always, you're trying to write these regulations for the bad apples. And in the Denver Post article, there were several metro districts that had gone out of their way to not advertise the elections, not, whatever, just make it very difficult for residents to find out and participate and get on the boards.
Well, by law, we're required to provide notice, and the new law that was passed last year requires us, to the extent that a resident has provided an email address, to actually email notice. It will be published on our website. It could also be published in the paper depending on the availability of what's being offered at that point in time as the districts develop. So it is highly likely that in this case now going forward that residents definitely will have knowledge of upcoming elections because we're required by law to make sure they're notified.
Yeah, so you said it could be that they get an email or that it's published in the paper. What is the agreement
The way
require?
it works is if they don't have an email on file with the Secretary of State when we get a registered list of electors from them, we are required to mail notice to them. So either way.
So the requirement in the service agreement would be either an email if they put that with their voter registration or physical.
Actually, it's not in the service plan, it's state law.
Okay.
It was passed last year.
So they will either get an email if that's available, or they will get a mailing, and then there's public notification through
Correct.
website and
Correct.
publication.
Correct.
Okay. That was it for me.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
Piggyback on that,
Trustee Stevens.
could we put in the agreement that as the build out, and instead of waiting 2 years, as it builds out and you have X amount of residents or homes built, that there are members of the board that have to step down that could be filled by residents?
Because the members of the board are elected officials, just like everyone here is, we could not, under state law, have them step down in that case. And again, everyone will be eligible to run if they want. We have districts that have homeowners in there, and we still have developer people on the boards only because we can't get homeowners to run. Not all districts are like that, so it's really going to depend on how interested the homeowners and property owners are of being put on the board.
Okay.
So, I mean, under a circumstance like you just explained, we could have eligible residents, but if no one's interested, we need people on the board, so. But again, state law will dictate every other year, people can run.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay. Questions?
Yes, I did read somewhere that potentially there might be, as part of the infrastructure added into some of the debt, and correct me if I'm wrong, a recreation center?
Correct.
Is that like for sure, or that's just kind of conceptual?
Bob, would you like to discuss any of the recreation? Bob Eck is the district president and also working with the development. Right now, I don't think anything's set in stone, but he can provide a little bit more detail.
That's my detail. There's really nothing set in stone. Now, what has been done, excuse me, what has been done is we've looked at a whole myriad of different amenities for within the community. But as to what's going to be built when, that hasn't really been prescribed yet. So
Right.
a little early yet, but.
Yeah, because if a recreation center was built there, it would be 6 miles to the Johnstown Rec Center, it would be 6 miles to the Berthoud Rec Center at Wagner Farm Park. And I think it'd be 8 miles or 9 miles to Chilson. It'd kind of be within distance of multiple other rec centers. The question I have for you, would the developer commit to not charging people outside the metro district more to use those amenities. I mean, because right now there's multiple metro districts that we have where technically the recreational amenities have been turned over for public use. But it's not truly public use because those outside of the district have to pay more to utilize it. So that's a concern for me, that it's creating, it's double taxation for the people who live there because they're paying sales tax that supports the first recreation center that's already existing. And then they're getting taxed again to pay for the recreation center that's there. But if anyone else wants to use it, you know, how do we know that they truly have access and it's not just in name only access? Is there any, you know?
That whether or not there will be fees charged to residents outside the district that are higher than in-district residents, that it will be a board decision. The way the service plan is written, it allows for residents outside the district boundaries to be charged a higher fee if the districts decide that's the way they want to go. Something to keep in mind, the reason for that would be that your district, the residents in the districts are paying property taxes to build those facilities and all the recreation facilities, which the non-residents of the districts are not doing. They're not contributing towards that infrastructure cost. So that would be one reason why you might see a slightly higher fee for non-residents of the districts. But they are public facilities open to the public.
And it wouldn't be that much different than if somebody from Loveland, we could choose to, we don't, but we could choose to charge a non-resident rate
Right.
at the rec center for people that live in Loveland. It's really not that different than somebody that lives in Berthoud and not in the Metro District, because the Metro District is its own separate entity.
Right, and so that's excellent, thank you for the explanation, that makes a lot of sense to me, thank you.
Piggyback on that though.
Well, let me, one last thing.
I've got something else looking at.
So the other issue that, or perceived issue with some other metro districts and the recreational amenities is that they have limited the number of people who can come in from outside. And if it's truly a public amenity, if people want to use it and they're willing to pay that entry fee, is the board allowed to limit the number of public that can utilize that over a certain period of time, or?
I actually can't answer that question at this point in time. To the extent that would happen, it would be a board decision. And obviously, it would really come down to the number of people that are allowed inside the building at any given time due to fire codes. I can't imagine that they would disallow, they wouldn't disallow like residents in the districts, but it really is going to depend on where we're at when we get to that point.
Okay. And as far as there are certain costs associated with your particular development that are not associated with any of the other developments really that we have here in town, maybe with the exception of the golf course. So the infrastructure that you are required to build include the High Plains Boulevard, which I understand is gonna run about 20 million to put High Plains Boulevard through the property. I think that was in our documents. Okay.
That's,
All right, and
Bob could speak to that.
yeah,
okay,
that's just for the first phase.
that's just for the first phase.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in addition, there will be significant investment into some sort of sewer facilities that don't currently exist. So not just sewer pipe, but actual sewer facilities.
The way the service plan is written, depending on where the sewer service is coming from, any public improvements that are going to be associated with providing sewer service to the districts are the district's public costs to pay. I don't know if you want to expand on.
No, I think, I mean, there's, the reality is the plant that's there today that is too small, or it's not, you know, not built capacity-wise to handle Turion, or frankly, even some of the early phase of Turion. So yes, that will have to be expanded, and we've been talking with staff about that. And we expect that that'll be, you know, a cost that will either get paid by the district, or if it's through fees that have been collected, you know, through the town, so.
Right, impact fees and
Right,
such.
exactly.
All right. I'm done, thank you.
Trustee Hardy.
No, I was just gonna add on that all these amenities and things that get built in this new development will cost other residences in the town some sort of financial obligation through our taxes. So in a sense, we are kind of paying for some of those services through fire and police service and things like that. So there are some shared costs out there, just not as close as the homeowners living a block away from the amenity. But I just wanted to reflect that building this development out there will put some stress and strain on things that the rest of the town is also sharing the cost in, and such as sewer, water, things like that, so.
Other questions? All right, thank you. At this time, I'll open it up to public comment. This is a chance for anyone who's in the audience or online that would like to speak to these agenda items. The board will not be able to respond since this is a public hearing, but we'll try to bring up your questions afterwards if you have any. And if you could please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less and state your name and address for the record. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to speak to these agenda items?
My name is Rodney Rutt, live at 5477 Well County Road, 5477 Well County Road 44, Johnstown. We have the farm directly north of Turion development, and I was just curious, wanted to see what was going on tonight, and just to make them aware, and I see Mr. Eck is here tonight, that we have the minor Longdon ditch that runs through the development, so that will be hopefully considered in the, God, I lost my train of thought.
Design, right.
Yeah, in these developments. And I know this isn't the place to say it tonight, but High Plains Boulevard is not in our best interest where it's located now. And also the floodplain has changed since the 2013 flood. So I'll be addressing that again at a later date. So I thank you.
I thank you. Thanks for coming out tonight. Anyone else in the room? Do you have anyone online?
No, we do not, Mayor.
All right, at this time I'll close public comment and bring it back to the board for deliberation and a vote. Strong thoughts, anyone? Trustee Hardy, what do you think?
I don't know, it's pretty big, and yeah, it's gonna take 30 years to build it out. I think it's a big concern. I think there's a lot of concern in the community about it, how it's gonna affect everything else. But that's true with any kind of growth, big or small. But yeah, I guess that's about all I'll say on that. So.
Okay. Trustee Sorcelli?
I just agree with Hardy's sentiments that this is a big decision, and I think there is a lot of concerns in the public. So I don't have anything
Sticking out right now.
significant, yeah.
Trustee Stevens?
Well, I think most of the concerns are land use, and that's not what this is about. When we adjourned or extended this subject, it was basically to get legal advice and counsel and to get their opinion. And I feel that since we had that discussion, I feel comfortable going forward with this.
Trustee Hyman?
Yeah, so I think at the last meeting, the first part of this public hearing, there was a lot of information provided about the high level of infrastructure that is gonna have to be provided, right? This is a little bit unusual because it's, a satellite development, not directly connected to all the other town utilities. So the fact that this is such an isolated parcel from the town's existing utilities and infrastructure, I think is kind of a unique case. I think they also have a lot of demands being put on them by CDOT and other authorities in terms of, like I said, extraordinary infrastructure that's going to be required for this project. I think I asked a lot of questions at the last meeting and got answers that because of the Metro District, we are going to minimize the taxpayers, the current taxpayers of Berthoud subsidizing this project. The homeowners and the business owners who are located in this project are going to be paying for this through and the developer will be paying for the infrastructure through this Metro District. I think it's also important to recognize that this is not a free ride for the developer, right? So even though this Metro District is going to be able to issue debt to build the infrastructure, there is still millions of dollars of investment by the developer to make this happen. And, I'm glad that it's, so 20 years ago, 25 years ago, actually, Johnstown, we woke up in the morning and we read in the paper that Johnstown had annexed the corner where Love's was located. And in Colorado, businesses or communities survive on sales tax. So the fact that Johnstown had annexed our exit off of I-25, which is, the main commerce corridor in northern Colorado, was alarming. And we found out that our town staff, without even asking the board, had told the developer, "Oh no, we're not interested. You're way ahead of your time. Go away." And they didn't do their homework because Johnstown was able to annex this using highway right-of-way and flagpole down I-25. And so we literally found out about it reading in the paper that Johnstown had annexed. And it was a multi-year legal battle for us to gain control of this intersection. Fortunately, most of the landowners in this area wanted to be a part of Berthoud and felt connected to Berthoud and did not feel connected to Johnstown. So the landowners worked with us to annex. So while it was in court being challenged and appealed, most of the landowners in the area indicated a preference for Berthoud. There were a couple of big annexations, and Berthoud also secured with the IGA with Little Thompson Water District, and by being declared by the state to be the sewer provider for this area, we were able to basically isolate this little patch of Johnstown where it was really undevelopable without Berthoud. Previous boards were able to strike a deal with Johnstown with some revenue sharing and some sharing on the sewer plant so that we were able to negotiate de-annexation from Johnstown with some revenue sharing. So anyway, this has been a 25-year battle for Berthoud to control the development of this intersection and the quality standards and what's going to be there and what it's going to look like, which, as Lonnie pointed out, is not a part of this decision tonight. And I had concerns that I also raised previously, that why do we need to approve this before we've seen the development plan? And I understand that the developer needs the security of knowing they're going to have financing before they can really develop the plan and present the land use to us, because if they don't know what their financing is, then they don't know what their project can afford. I'm really glad that our standards, we've raised our standards like 4 times in the last 5 or 6 years. So I feel much more comfortable with this moving forward now than 10 or 20 years ago, when the standards would have been much lower and it would not have been nearly as high quality development. So I think everything we've heard shows that this is necessary. I'm satisfied with the cap on the mill levy. I don't think that that's going to be able to be abused. The one thing that I would like to see, and I'd like to request from the attorney, is I would like to see some additional requirement for resident participation on the boards at the earliest possible opportunity. Because even though state law requires the notice, I think that it's really easy for homeowners and property owners to not really know about the district. And, you know, my opinion, the sooner the districts are controlled by the residents who live there and not the developer board, the better for everybody. So I would like to request that the board entertain that and that we get language from our attorneys to add that. And I'd like to have staff, I mean, we always plan around, I mean, Bertha has put a high priority on agricultural preservation east of town to not have what Highway 34 turned into in Loveland or what 119 is in Longmont. So I feel pretty comfortable, and Chris, maybe you can comment that any future planning is gonna protect and preserve this ditch that Mr. Rutt brought up.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think that there's a whole lot of similar situations we've been in town. Farmstead is a good example. There's the McIntyre ditch that runs through Farmstead. And certainly those will be protected, and the interests of those ditch companies will be protected during the development process. That's something we're aware of and wouldn't allow those to be negatively impacted in the future without agreement from the ditch company or the shareholders of that ditch.
Okay, well, thanks. Those are my comments. And like I said, if the rest of the board is interested in adding language, then after everybody else gives their comments, I'd like to hear it from the attorney, what that would entail.
Okay. Trustee Grace.
For the sake of brevity,
Sorry.
no, it's all good. No, it's not, it wasn't a comment at you, it's more just looking at the time. It's definitely I know myself, and I'm fairly certain most of the board has kind of read through the 500 pages or so a couple times over the past more than, I would say, a month at this point, because we had a study session going over metro districts and then this, and then 2 weeks later we're coming back to it. It's a lot to take in, and it's definitely a gut check. And the fact that we've been able to go through this, have all of our questions answered, and while it still, I don't know, metro districts don't exactly fit snugly in one people's belief or another, it is what it is, and it's how it needs to get done. I mean, it's made it through every single hurdle we put in its way, and it's all well reasoned and answered. So it's definitely a scary change, but it's a necessary change, as all big decisions are. So.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
So, the current service plan that's in place, that is not associated with me, has a debt limit of 75 million, which just pales in comparison to what is being requested now. 75 million is what was in the initial 2004-2005 plan, the debt. In number 1, in the second paragraph, in order to respond to future contingencies, etc. So in looking at, gosh, what hard costs do we have in this development that we don't have in other developments? We've got water that may or may not be needed to connect to town, that may be as high as 12 million. High Plains Boulevard, the first phase is 20 million. CDOT help, according to the documents, is 3.2 million. At least 1 million just for the initial extra wastewater, and then potentially maybe up to 60 million for the upgrades and maybe a new water treatment plant. So if you add that up, that's 80, 90, that's about 100 million. So the current service plan covers a big chunk of those structural things that really need to be in place for this community that is farther out from town. The concerns I have are, okay, so if we have increased taxes, of course, there are the arguments that just because people pay increased taxes doesn't mean that they vote against tax and bond issues. However, I'd really like to see some true research on that rather than anecdotal evidence. And I have not seen any true research on that. So they're in a different school district, correct? So we don't have to worry about them overwhelming our town, the old town Berthoud, when our school district asks for a mill levy increase. This Turion development, when it's built out, is not going to be able to affect, or will not affect, votes on our school district's bond issue. Fire, they will be in our fire district. So they may not, there may be an effect on whether they would approve further increases in mill levies for the fire district. Same for the library district. Are they in the Weld or the?
They're not in the Berthoud Library District.
Okay, so the library district is not one. So essentially, it's the fire district that might, fire district and the town of Berthoud, if we ever needed to increase our base mill levy for property taxes for whatever reason, then Turion development may have more voters than Old Town Berthoud. So if it's some sort of tax increase to fund improvements to Old Town Berthoud, it may or may not affect whether it passes. Because, like I said, I have heard anecdotally from people who have lived in metro districts that it doesn't affect their decisions on voting on tax increases, but I have not seen any hard data on that. So, you know, that all needs to be balanced out, however, with the benefit from increased sales tax, right? So if we go forward with this development and give them the funding that they would like, then we may not need to increase our mill levy for anything in the future because we will have enough sales tax dollars to fund the things that we need to do in the new Turion development or in Berthoud, or in Old Town. So there are a couple things that I might suggest, and this is just me, obviously. I would prefer to minimize the max mill rate for residential, like Windsor has. Windsor has instituted a model service plan where they limit it to 39 mills rather than 55. And the other thing I might suggest we consider is limiting the bond to the bond index that they suggested plus 2% instead of plus 3%. 2% above the bond index, it seems like a pretty good return on investment for the first 20 to 30 years that bond is being paid by the taxpayers, with some reduction in risk and some return on investment for those people who buy the bonds. So those are some things that that personally, looking at what the hard costs are versus what costs they could put onto add to the houses, how many $5,000, $10,000 more per home, instead of issuing these bonds and having higher taxes every year. So it's the cost of the home. Does the cost of the home include the cost of the infrastructure, or does the cost of the home only include the actual building of the home and everything else they pay in taxes for the next 20 years? So in my opinion, I would like to reduce the overall tax burden to those things that are actually extra and in addition to what a standard home would cost. For example, you know, some of our developments where the small developers have taken loans out on their own houses. They have used their own retirement funds and pulled them together in order to not do metro districts. Actually, I know this for a fact, and I'm not making this up. So if small developers can provide a modest amount of amenities that meet our development code, provide for open space, provide for parks and what all the things that we require, then I think a large developer should be able to swallow some of that. Now, this one is going to have a lot more than that, so do I say, no, we shouldn't, we shouldn't give them any mill levy at all because, they can do it all on their own? No, they can't. They really do need help for these massive infrastructure projects that they're going to have to do. And they are going to have additional amenities that some of these smaller developers are not able to provide, right? However, I think going up to the maximum mill levy, just because we can, is potentially not appropriate for our town. I think we've given developers thus far a very long leash to do, to just kind of do what they'd like. And personally, I think it's time to rein that back in a little bit and not go with the maximum every single time a developer comes in. They need to have some more skin in the game, and I think holding back on the mill levy might be an appropriate way to do that. So I might suggest instead of 55 that the mill start out, because it's going to go up with the Gallagher stuff. So instead of starting at 55, scale it back to 40, which is one more than Windsor has at 39. Let them do whatever they need to do for the commercial districts, because I do think protection for commercial districts is necessary, and limit the bond index, the bond interest to the index plus 2% instead of index plus 3%. And that's all I'll say.
Thank you. Well, as the board, or at least Jeff and Maureen and Tim are aware, I'm not a fan of this development. I brought up before that it has nothing to do with you guys in front of this room, but and I know my father and Jeff, and there's a lot of history getting out there in the first place, but I mean, sales tax does lead the way, but we're also putting 4,800 homes up there, so it kind of 58. To me, it defeats the purpose. And back to Trustee Stevens' point, that's a land use decision, not this, but I think the two do tie together. I wish that we could have seen the possibility of this development ahead of having to look at the numbers, because they do scare me, and Berthoud's history, at least while I've been on the board, has been tragically bad development. And it's getting better for sure, but nothing compared to the other communities I've driven through and seen what we could do. So I wish I could have seen some of that concrete, this is what this is going to look like. Just a little bit of history of why I'm coming off so harsh. I can see a board that's going to be predominantly people 4 miles away that have no tie to this community. Their kids go to a different school district, splits the community in half. So again, I know how this is just a numbers game tonight, and the zoning and land use is down the road, but I'm very hesitant, and I've had problems with metro districts. Obviously, I've been quoted in the Denver Post of my opposition to them. I would agree to something. I understand this is going to go ahead no matter what, but I think something a little more reasonable with I'd be interested in looking at that 40 mills cap. So I guess from here we could go to Trustee Hyman's suggestions and Trustee or Mayor Pro Tem Dowers. And I only wrote down Mayor Pro Tem Dowers, so Trustee Hyman, if you could repeat those, and we could you said you wanted the attorney to feed in on it?
Yeah, so my concern was that we have, that we add provisions that require resident participation at the earliest possible opportunity, and, realizing that if there's no residents available, but like I said, just I'd like to hear the attorney's suggestion for language that we could add as a condition.
Attorney Smith or Attorney Norton?
And to be perfectly honest, the 40 mills wasn't brought up at all during questions, so I think we should hear from staff what the financial impact of that on the project would be, because we haven't heard any information on that.
Attorney Norton, can we start with Trustee Hyman's question?
Yes, Mayor. My colleague, Ms. Smith, had put together a draft a few minutes ago where he suggested that the service plan require that there should be a vacancy created on the board of directors of each residential district to be filled by a person who is a non-developer affiliated, non-developer representative within 1 year after the sale of the first home in the district. I would probably add to that with a preference for district residents to fill the vacancy. Is
that, you write that down?
Yeah, I'm writing it down. So that, you said to create a vacancy within 1 year after the first
sale of the
sale.
first home, right?
And then what about the first election? Did we have any language for that?
We did not. The person, as I understand how the statute operates, Trustee Hyman, if a vacancy has been created, then that person is appointed to fill the remaining term for which the director who had vacated the position, what they were elected for. So let's say it's a 3-year term, you have this 1-year provision, the appointee, the homeowner appointee, would serve for 2 years and then stand for re-election at the next election. So,
Okay. And do you agree with the applicant's attorney that the new state law has stringent enough requirements that the residents will actually be notified of the elections?
I think the notification requirements are better than they were before. I think the practical concerns that you raise are real ones.
Is there anything that we should or could add it's above the new state law that would further ensure that residents would know about the elections?
Well, this is an addition that really compels that representation and kind of bypasses the notice requirement. The developer would have to open a vacancy, they could have to fill the vacancy by appointment, and it would have to be somebody not affiliated with them with a preference for a resident. So in a way that kind of bypasses the notice requirement in a practical way and just says you need to put some resident representation on.
Do you agree that the state requirements now would require a mailing or an email to every
That is my understanding.
every resident elector?
That is my understanding.
Okay.
Is that limited, you said a citizen?
Yeah.
Is that limited to just one, or can we say if 3 citizens come forward, 3 can be appointed?
That's at your discretion.
Because I don't want to limit it to just one. I mean,
Yeah.
if in that course of that year,
Sure.
it could be multiple appointees.
Yeah, there's a difference obviously between compelling a complete turnover in the composition of the board in a short period of time and this more gradual approach. But that's a matter of policy for you folks to address.
Yeah, so my take on that is that if the elections are every 2 years, if we're compelling one vacancy within 1 year, then we're already jump-starting that by a year. And if the notice requirements are sufficient, then it's up to the residents to step up and join the board after that. I don't think we can compel people to run for election if they're not gonna run for election.
How many people are on the board?
It's a 5-person board.
It's a 5-person board.
The other thing I would comment is that these are they're technical positions. It takes some time. For example, the Special District Association has a significant orientation program and handbook for new board members. It's not something that people could just step into. And my experience with responsible developers as they make this transition is they help the new board really promote the representation. And I think there's something to be said for 1 seat for homeowners to start with. They go through this kind of orientation transition period. I assume politics being what it is and should be, they'll recruit their neighbors to say, let's fill these other positions as we come up for election. And that'll make for a smoother process that's a better transition.
All right, thank you. I agree with Trustee Hyman's points about Mayor Pro Tem Dower's suggestions. Is that okay if you want to pursue that as staff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I address something real
Sure.
quick, just to add on, to cover the vacancy issue? By law, the developer representatives, because they're not residents of the districts, the Special District Act allows them to qualify as the eligible electors of the district if they are under contract to purchase taxable property in the district. So all the developer representatives on the board are under these contracts. Now, if there's a vacancy on the board, by law, before the developer could even consider qualifying somebody new on a contract, we're required by law to publish notice that there's a vacancy on the board, and we have to actually wait 10 days to see if there's any public interest from somebody else that wants to be on the board. So making sure that residents become aware that there are vacancies on the board, that will happen because we're required to publish notice that those vacancies exist before we'd even be allowed to qualify and appoint a new developer representative. So I wanted to clear that point up.
May I ask a clarifying
Sure.
question? So the notice is 10 days to any property owner, like you said, before they offer.
It's a published notice, but we also, usually what we do, because everyone is going to be required to have, all districts are required to have websites, is any type of notice is always published, put on the website as well. I just want to clarify that we're not mailing out a notice to 1,000 residents, hey, there's a vacancy on the board, but it's published and it would be on the website.
And where else is it published other than the website?
I'm sorry?
What other media is it published?
That would be it. It would
Just
be
the
the
website.
newspaper, the Birthday Surveyor, I believe, and then their website is where they would see that, yeah.
Thank you. Administrator Kirk, do you feel comfortable speaking to the 39 or 40 mil cap for residential?
Only to say that I have no idea what that does to the project financially. Certainly all of their financial projections, I think, were based upon the maximum mill levy.
Understandable.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea.
I mean, they have 30 years to figure it out, but.
Okay, well, let's do some polling, I guess, and I figured, is that weird?
Yeah, I mean, I can't even begin to comment or process on Marine's suggestion because we haven't heard any information on that. And so I think we should either ask for someone from the applicant to comment on that so that we can consider it, or otherwise I just don't see how we can even make a decision because we don't have any information.
Do you feel comfortable? Yeah, right.
On the mill
Same.
levy?
Right. If that went down to a 30 or 40?
Right now, under the current service plan, the districts are allowed to have 50 mills, which have been adjusted under the old law, Gallagherized, but it's been adjusted to 55.664, so that's what you see in the service plan. So that's asking for what we already have on the residential side. The original service plan did not carve out anything for commercial districts, so we have a cap on commercial district debt at 45, and then the mill levy for O&M is up to 18 mills, which is just slightly higher. Keep in mind that service plan you have is from 2005. It was from a different developer that had different plans at the time, so that's why you see the debt's much different, just what they were anticipating. But now with the new developer and the whole development being expanded into Mead of 2,200 acres, more is going to be needed to justify this. Now, we have a finance plan that's in the service plan, and we have run last summer we did run different models trying to see how low we can get the mill levies to help pay off debt, and we made sure that that finance plan is indicating what the properties could hold and impose with mill levies and being able to pay off the debt as it's set, if it's set at the maximum amount. So I don't think if we went lower to 40, because we we worked around several different variations last summer that we'd be able to do this.
With the current service plan, what would it be right now? I mean, you said
It is, for debt, it's Gallagherized, it would be 55.664, which is what you see. And there was no carve out for commercial in the original service.
so if we did nothing right here, you could go forward with
Well, we
that.
have 6 districts of just on the Berthoud side, but this project includes Meade, and it requires both jurisdictions to sign off on the service plan.
And if they stayed with the old service plan, which they could Gallagherize and raise, their maximum would be 75 million. So that's a big difference right there. So yeah, they could go up to the maximum mill levy, but the maximum borrowing amount is 75 million, which is not gonna cut it. That's not even gonna get close.
Yeah, so I think I would, okay, thank you. So I guess I would go back to Will's comments, and I think Will kind of actually summed it up. So if Berthoud wants this project, then we should approve this because it's reasonable, it's got a lot of safeguards. Our attorneys have said that it meets our safeguards. And if we don't want this project, then we should not approve it because that will stop the project. And so I'll go back to the debate from 20 years ago. It's not a question of whether this intersection is going to develop. So as part of an annexation, part of the requirements of an annexation is that you provide services and you allow development. You don't annex land to have it sit as open space. And this is on the major interstate highway that runs north-south through Colorado. So if we don't want this project, then don't support the Metro District. And in 3 years, they'll be able to de-annex, and Johnstown will be able to develop it, which we've already seen what their plans are for Highway 60, which is thousands of multifamily and a gigantic convenience store. Or if you do want Berthoud's future boards to be able to control the land use, control the architecture, control the open space, control the amenities, then we should support it and provide them with the financing they need to do the project the way we want them to do it. But the thought that this is gonna stay a farm was gone 25 years ago.
I've never heard of the term de-annex. May I have an explanation of that?
That is the right of the property owner to seek to have their property taken out of the town's municipal boundaries because the town has made it clear that they're not going to provide services.
That's like delinking, is that the same thing?
It's
Okay.
it's disconnection, is
Okay.
what the term is under the statute, but
So-
it's undoing the annexation.
Yeah, so really quickly, you guys have heard this story before, so Serenity Ridge was a development done by the daughter of the Wilsons, who are the people who annexed this 1,400 acres to Berthoud. And when Serenity Ridge was potentially gonna be denied by the town because there was no sewer service, right? That development was built with no sewer service whatsoever. Anyway, when that came to us, and there was a suggestion that we would deny it, Jolinda Wilson said, "You deny this and I will de-annex the farm." And it passed 6-1, even though it was a subdivision with no sewer service. So, and I was the one. But anyway, they absolutely, if we have no interest in developing this property, then, like I said, don't support this, let it go, and it'll develop somewhere else.
But is there an opportunity to meet the developer halfway? I suggested 40 because of Windsor's cap of 39. I don't know what kind of developments have come through Windsor. But I also don't believe that unless we go full bore and give every single, as much as possible, that this project wouldn't possibly go through. There's gotta be some sort of.
I'm feeling it's not about not approving this
Yeah, it's not about
development.
not approving it.
My issue is I think development needs to pay its way. And to me, metro districts aren't developers paying their way, in my view. It's a way of them financing through another source because banks stopped financing after all the predatory lending from past developments that went bankrupt and everybody lost their shorts and interest rates went to the high. People were losing their homes left and right. And, you know, it's just the financing tool. It's like, we're giving them the maximum blank check to do this development. And I'm just feeling like the developer this size can pave more of their way.
It's not black or white, it's not yes or no, it is there a middle ground at which they can finance maybe not every single bell and whistle, maybe not every outstanding feature, but they can go ahead and do a good development with decent amenities and, you know, commercial areas that, you know, could potentially support sales tax dollars. I don't see it as a black and white yes or no.
If I may suggest you consider it from this perspective, why would we not want them to add all the bells and whistles? I mean, unless you're going to be a resident out there who's going to pay that tax, in which case you've received disclosure and you know what your tax liability is before you buy that home. As a member of our community, why would you not want to have the nicest community they could build? That would be my only question to ask in response to your comment is, why would we want to limit their ability to build great amenities and infrastructure and parks and say, we'd like you to build something lesser in order to protect a future taxpayer who already knows what they're getting into when they buy the house. And if they don't, I don't.
Right, but they're thinking that they're paying the same tax as everybody else in town.
But they are in a lot of cases. I mean, most of our metro districts in town have the same exact mill levy, including the one I used to live in. And it was a nice subdivision and well managed. And you know, I guess my point is there are already different mill levies throughout town based on existing metro districts. This is no different.
It's just that there seems to be a tendency for communities in Weld County to have lots of metro districts. If you look at the state map of special districts and metro districts, there's an interactive map, and Weld County is loaded with them. Somehow, though, other towns and counties seem to be able to function just fine without metro districts. And so I think that this particular metro district does need to exist. It already exists, but I think it does need additional funding because of the extensive infrastructure beyond a standard housing development, right? This is not a standard housing development. It is very large. So I do believe that they do need more funding. But to do carte blanche, full, maximum metro district mill levy right now, I have heard from so many residents that do not want that imposed because of the electoral power that this development is going to have someday. The electoral power, the number of people living in that will override anything in.
But that has nothing to do with a mill levy.
So would you be suggesting that?
She's saying it affects their willingness to levy new tax.
Levy new taxes.
So would you feel more comfortable if they come back with a more detailed, this is what this is going to cost, this is going to cost? It didn't seem more like we're just kind of throwing a whole lot of money out there and they're going to spend it all and hopefully we'll get something nice out of it, because I don't know.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Tim.
It's just like it almost kind of seems like we're giving them the maximum amount of money and they haven't shown us exactly what they're going to give us because we're not at that stage yet. So I almost kind of feel like we're putting the money way before the cart here, but they need to have that money before the cart so they can go decide what they want to do with it.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm kind of in that catch-22. It's like, hey, I'm going to give you $500 million. I have no idea what I'm going to get. Okay.
For clarity, they have an approved overall development plan already.
PUD,
and have for
a PUD.
Yeah, really limited concept plan, but doesn't show us.
It's actually very extensive.
Okay. Trustee Sorcelli.
Well, I appreciate the thoughts. I feel like the financing or the financial aspects are not the issue. I think that's the structure for a development like this going through. And the people that are buying homes in that area are agreeing to that system and we've required our developers to notify them that, so they're aware of what they're getting into. So I don't think that's our realm of concern. I think for me, it falls more in with what Mayor Karspek shared, is how is the long-term effects of like Berthoud Town proper affected by this development, not the metro district dynamic, but the voting, the taxation, the traffic. I think just the scale of it, I think is alarming. And not because it may be a beautiful development and it may be an incredible opportunity for sales tax revenue. So I think there's this balance that, are we ready for the scale? And are we ready for how it's gonna affect the town of Berthoud? I don't think the financing mechanisms, and I don't want to give arbitrary mill levies either. There's an expertise to that, but I think as long as people are notified of what they're buying a home in, and they're not gonna sell houses if it's not feasible for people. They're not gonna buy them, so they have to make it marketable. So that's kind of on the developer to make sure it's a marketable product and people will still buy into the development because they have a lot of houses to sell. So that's kind of on them to make sure it's fair. But I'm concerned if we're ready. There's a pause there for me for sure. But I also agree with Trustee Hyman that if we miss the opportunity, will we still have the impacts in many ways and not have the sales generation?
All right, well, I think it comes down to a vote, but Trustee Hyman, you probably want to do that amended one with your suggestion if there's nothing else.
Sure. I move to approve the second amended and restated consolidated service plan for Turion Metropolitan Districts 1 through 6 and Turion Metropolitan Districts 7 through 21, formerly known as SMPG Metropolitan District numbers 1 through 6, with the added condition that future metro districts create a vacancy on the board within 1 year after the first sale of property in the metro district for a resident elector.
Second. All right, Trustee Hyman has moved, Trustee Grace has seconded.
And I would like to amend the motion.
Okay. What was in your amendment?
My amendment would be that the mill levy be limited to 50 mills instead of a maximum of 55.
Is there a second on that, or first, is there a friendly agreement, I guess, to accept that as the original motion? If not,
No, I think we need a second.
Is there a second on that? Okay, we'll continue with the original motion there. Motion's been seconded. Clerk, we have a roll call vote.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee Hyman?
I'm sorry, could we just have 1 minute of discussion before you call the vote?
Sure.
So I hear
I
you
just thought
guys.
there was no second. on that.
No, I mean, you didn't allow for discussion on the original motion. You just called for the roll call vote on the original motion.
Go ahead.
We just have just brief discussion. So I hear you guys, right? And I have concerns about this too, because like one of my problems is that it isn't in our school district. It's not in our post office, right? Some of it's not in 80513. It's a weird situation, and it's not a function of Berthoud. It's a function of we have to play with the rules that are set by people far beyond this room. And the bottom line is that it is going to develop. So I think it's far better for Berthoud and future town boards to control that and direct that and reap the benefits of it. I also don't see any, so it might be possible for them to somehow run a slate and take over the town board in the future, but they can't impose taxes on Old Town, right? You can only pass taxes with a vote of the people. So I think this is like the lesser of two evils, right? This is something that gives us a say and allows us to have input going forward, whereas if we just walk away and deny this, we're done. We're out of the picture. Because I don't think the development will go forward. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Anything else?
No.
No, I mean, sorry.
I agree with that, and if we limit them, it could damper the quality of this project, and I think we've tried so hard to make, our standards higher, everything higher and better. I think, allowing them this higher mill levy will more ensure that. So.
Okay.
Just a quick comment on the tax situation. I think it is fair to say that if you have a really highly taxed majority of your population, if the fire district, for example, needs to go to an election, are those people going to vote it down because they're already very severely taxed? So that is something to consider, that there are other times and entities that will need to increase taxes as time goes on, and as we see, people in the metro districts are already feeling very pinched by taxation. So it is something to keep in mind.
If I may just make one suggestion, it might ease some of that, maybe it doesn't. But there are a lot of places around the country where property taxes are dramatically higher than what we pay here. And people continue to vote for additional tax levies to pay for new things that they want. I can give you a very specific example. It's anecdotal in a sense, right? But my best friend lives in a community in Texas. His house costs much less than mine did here, but his property taxes are 4 times what I pay. And yet his community voted a fairly significant property tax levy to build a $100 million football stadium, right, for their high school. And they were glad to do it, right? And so I think that it comes down to what are people willing to pay for, right? If it's something that people really desire, and it's an amenity they feel like they need or want, they'll pay for it. I think is the case in most instances.
But there's also the history.
And I think it's all relative, right?
Oh, and this development will bring in millions of dollars for the fire district that it's not generating now, so.
So we have a motion, it's been seconded. Generally, that final discussion is for amendments.
Thank you.
So, anything else? Clerk, may roll call vote, please.
Trustee Stevens.
Yes.
Trustee Hyman.
Yes.
Trustee Hardy.
No.
Trustee Sorcelli.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower.
No.
Trustee Grace.
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
No. All right, well, thank you all for your time. I think this affects the second to last.
Yeah, that had to pass first.
What's the final vote on that?
4-5-4? No, sorry.
4-3.
4-3.
It lost 4-3.
All right, thank you all for attending. We could, I guess, if we don't want to take a break, we can move on to number 7.
Can we save that another time?
Or if we want to, folks, trustees. Or we can move that on to a study session or a different meeting. I'd also agree with Trustee Sorcelli, but it's up to you guys.
Well, what did you say?
Like to do?
So this last one, do you want to have this tonight, or do we want to bump this to a future meeting? Advantage neighborhood.
I think bump it.
45 minutes.
I think bump it because to me it doesn't look like it'll take that long, but I've been wrong all night.
When I see public hearing, I feel so. So if you guys agree, Rachel?
Yeah, I'd like to give Vantage the time that they need, so I think it would be appropriate to bump it.
Okay.
So you would need a motion to continue this to a date certain, so that wouldn't have to be renoticed?
Okay.
Date and time certain?
Administrator Kirk, any recommendations on that?
I think I would suggest that you set a date certain for February 22nd. That would be our next regular meeting.
Okay. All right, is there a motion to?
I move to postpone the item number 7, Vantage Neighborhood Master Plan and Preliminary Plat to known meeting date, February 22nd.
Second.
Trustee Grace is moved, Trustee Hardy is second. Any discussion on that? Clerk, may I roll call vote, please?
Trustee Hyman,
Yes.
trustee Sorsali,
Yes.
trustee Stevens,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
trustee Grace,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes. Okay, we can move on to reports now. Maybe it's a good, do we still want to do the executive session?
I think that's up to you. There's,
What's the timeframe, do you think?
I think it's purely up to you. This is about the Newell Farm property, as you know. They approached us about acquiring it from them. We can do that when the board so fits in line. And I can continue to have discussions with them.
There's no instant deadline on this one, right?
That deadline is set by you in terms of this property acquisition and under what terms you want to go forward.
Attorney Smith, do we want to do the same with this? If the board agrees with that, or do we want to hear the executive session tonight?
I'm
You'd like to
done.
wait.
Okay.
I won't make the decisions if you
Yeah.
don't want to make any.
Yeah, that can just be tabled.
Renoted?
It doesn't need to be noticed.
In the interim, if the board is okay with it, I'll go ahead and discuss with them what terms they're comfortable with, which I haven't done. So maybe we'll have them sort of make an offer to us first. And then we can discuss those terms in our next executive session.
Work? Okay. All right, well, we got reports then. We'll start off with staff.
Nothing else for me tonight.
Attorney Smith,
I have nothing, Your Honor.
trustee Hardy,
Nothing.
trustee Sorcelli,
Nothing.
trustee Stevens,
Nothing.
trustee Hyman.
Port last week.
Of course.
It'll be quick. Trails master plan was discussed. The trail north on First Street was suggested to be added. I think that was and then there was discussion about raising our standards so that HOAs or Metro District controlled trails provided the same level of like trash cans or other services as town. Because there's some complaints down in Heritage Ridge about the lack of facilities provided by the developer. Looked at the Roberts Lake East plan, which is very passive, but definitely a big improvement over what's there. I think that will come to the board later. There was kind of a sentiment that, so the new, after we took out the pickleball and the basketball court at Town Park, that was replaced with just sort of turf and lawn and some plantings. So there was definitely a sentiment on Port that we find some other active yet quiet compatible uses with neighbors, but not just have it be lawn. Anyway, and then I'm meeting the welder at Will's house to fix his plaque tomorrow morning. And out of the four I installed, only one failed, and it's because pretty sure Will's faces south, so it gets a lot hotter.
Yeah, I did want to clarify that too. It has nothing to do with you, and I appreciate you coming out.
All right, well, I was able to get a hold of the welder, and we'll be there in the morning.
You saying there's a lot of hot air out of that?
No, he's great. And I think all of them should be welded. Trustee Grace.
I guess I only have two. The area around Loveland Reservoir, I guess I was asking staff, I think a couple of meetings ago, if we could look at the cost for having any kind of slide prevention into Loveland Reservoir.
Traffic wise?
Yeah. Is that a thing we could get numbers on to see if that's something we could do?
We'd have to go out and, it is, if the board wants us to do that.
Is it significant?
It's not as simple as just asking for a quote, I don't think. I think there's some level of traffic engineering that'll need to go into that. So it's not as simple as just like calling up Loveland Barricade and saying, hey, can you pop in some?
Right. I'm just thinking more along the lines of, because it gets a lake breeze and it gets cold a lot out there, and because even though it's banked, we're gonna have a lot of people living over there not too long from now. I would rather we have that and not need it than the other way around. Just a thought. Don't know if anybody else wants to look at that.
I agree to look at the cost. I guess we need a majority. Did you say it? No? Okay. We do?
Look at the cost.
Okay, we got it then.
Look at the cost.
Great.
Only other one was Bertha Parkway, County Road 17, north of 287. That stretch of road up into the roundabout can we look at that, redesign that traffic wise somehow? Because it's without fail, every single day you see both lanes trying to turn up into Loveland, which is our right of way. It is constantly some kind of funnel system there with a roundabout that seems to be a little bit too narrow. It's just, that problem's only gonna be getting worse.
So
And I
you're
figure,
talking about 2 turn lanes going into 1 lane before the roundabout.
yeah, and you know, one turns off clearly into Prairie Star, which will eventually turn into its own commercial area. But while we have the space now, is it something we could look at to possibly widen? Because it's a lot easier to do it now than it is when people have, you know, sod and everything set. Is that something?
There
we
are
can do?
future widening requirements as part of some of the developments in the area.
Okay, so that's not gonna be that long.
Between 287 and the first roundabout? Okay.
Yeah, that was my concern, is making sure it's wide enough, because it's very much not right now.
Because you're talking about the 2 left turns off of 287 going
Yeah,
north.
going
You're
northbound.
talking about northbound traffic in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Basically all the people going back to Loveland.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they
Yeah,
go
so
2
almost-
lanes and then they all try and cram in
Uh-huh.
right before the roundabout.
It should be a 1 left turn lane and
So-
just make the left turn
Man,
lane longer or
that
something.
that backup, it goes, there's a reason why there's 2 left lanes, and they both fill up.
Yeah.
So,
It's just make it longer, make it a single lane.
yes, you know, put a toll system on there like CDOT does. That was all I have to report.
Awesome. Well, this is great. Mayor Pro Tem.
Nothing to report?
Okay, just 2 brief things. Well, I forgot the first one, so one brief thing. It was really cool. I attended there's an overdue media event for the adaptive park going in at Farmstead. And as you guys might know, and I think it's public now, that Will Edwards is selling, I don't know what portion, but I think it's public because he told me. Anyway, he donated $100,000 to kick off this $1.2 million park, which is going to be likely the biggest in Colorado for it's more than ADA, it's adaptive. So it's pretty good, cool kind of send off from him. And that's it.